Welcome to The Last Cast, HBO's unofficial Last of Us recap podcast. This show, hosted each week by me, Jack, and Andrew,
Hello there.
will take a deeper look into the mega TV series event, The Last of Us. We'll break down, assess, compare, contrast, and have a bit of fun as we go. So grab yourself a cup of Joel's favorite blend, and let's get on with it. Which is just a very timely line. People, fans of the game, that's something that Bill says, but
Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we don't have too much opening chatter this week because we covered, I think, everything that we possibly could in the episode that dropped 4 days ago on Friday, which was Infected.
I have some opening chatter. Just very quickly. Thank you, everyone, for the birthday wishes. It was not necessary. It made my day. So thank you.
Yes.
A lot of folks reached out on Twitter. A few folks DM'd. It was lovely. Thank you.
I love that so much for you.
Yeah.
I know. I was mad at myself because I waited way too late. It was like 11 something. No, I don't think it was that late. I can't even remember, but I was like, fuck. So, yes, yesterday, January 30th was Andrew's 75th birthday. So,
yeah. So, I mean, not bad. Not, keeping up with these youngins, watching the HBOs. I love my stories, I love my Grishams and I love my stories. So,
yeah, you look great.
It's all about moisturizing, I started young. I started moisturizing at 3, and I've kept up a very vigorous routine since. So
for 72 years.
It pays off. I'm just telling you, it pays off. Just some oil of Olay and you're good to go.
Random product placement. We are not sponsored, but yes. So happy.
I just couldn't think of anything, but yes, thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday. But yeah, as for like catching up with things we might have missed or prompts or cues or little in between things, I have not been called out on any. So I guess we're doing okay.
What a day.
Yeah. But we did get one new review over on iTunes by a Jim Whiz.
Jim
Whiz. That just simply
whiz,
says
like Cheese Whiz?
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Jim Whiz. Okay.
Jim Whiz. And it just says, and this is if you're coming over from Wayfaring, it just simply says, "Nicely done."
I have that on tap here. Hold on.
Here we go. Ready?
We can we don't really have a soundboard for this show because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is what Jim Whiz is referring to.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
That's Joel from the games.
Yes, it sure is.
Nicely done.
There you go. That's a little something for our game podcast listeners.
Yes. But that's it. That's kind of all we got going on to before we get into reviewing episode 3 of The Last of Us. Long time. So once again, just a reminder, there will be no spoilers in this show for events that may or may not happen in future episodes of The Last of Us on HBO. And our drop schedule will be Tuesdays or Wednesdays. We're just kind of in flux a little bit because yesterday was Andrew's birthday on a Monday. We're recording this on a Tuesday, so it'll drop on a Wednesday. It's just how that goes.
No more big birthdays or life events or vacations for the foreseeable Mondays. So, you know, should be pretty good.
Yeah. And some quick contact info. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can do that on Twitter at TLOU Podcast. If you would like to do that on Instagram, you can do that at TLOU Podcasts. And if you'd like to email us, it is tloupodcast@gmail.com. We just, this is something that we do on Wayfaring Strangers, but people that write into our show, we dedicate pretty much entire episodes of bonus show episodes to emails that people send us. So if you heard something that we had said on the show and you were like, oh, F yes, or F no, and you want to write us about that.
It's 50-50 shot.
Yeah. That you can do that at tloupodcast@gmail.com. And that's all we got going for the opening bit. Andrew, can you read the episode summary as given to us by HBO?
HBO doing the Lord's work here. After a global pandemic destroys civilization, a hardened survivor takes charge of a 14-year-old girl who may be humanity's last hope.
That seems like an overarching summary. I feel like because I grabbed the summary before the show dropped, it didn't tell us the whole thing.
It's possible.
I think I have to wait until after the show going forward.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, this is good. This is good radio. If I figure this out, I guess I could probably just turn the television on. Regardless, it doesn't super matter. I'm about to break it down for y'all.
Yes.
All right.
Let's do it.
Give you the real deal.
Yeah.
Here's what happens in episode 3. I tried to split the difference. I was a little short on episode 1, little long on episode 2. I think I've struck the right balance. Here we go. We start the episode in the wilderness, 10 miles outside of Boston. It looks suspiciously like where they filmed The Revenant. I'll just put that out there.
In Alberta, Canada, I believe.
Correct. I don't think 10 miles outside of Boston looks anything like where they are.
No,
I'm gonna go out on a limb.
It doesn't. Actually, side note, Stephen King actually tweeted about that. And everyone was like, "That's your takeaway, Stephen?" Because he was just like, this is not 10 miles outside of Boston. Carry on.
Stephen King talks about anything that you do, it's a good thing. He doesn't talk about bad things. So
true.
We learned there's a 10-mile hike to our next destination. So before that, we stop at a stash house. Joel restocks. Ellie secretly finds an infected person in the basement under some collapsed rubble. She assesses it and then stabs it in the head. Along the otherwise scenic route, we have a brief discussion on how the outbreak started, see a crashed airplane, and eventually come across a pit of dead bodies. Camera lingers on one piece of clothing that triggers a flashback to 4 days before the outbreak began. We're in a small town, and it is being evacuated, but one man refuses to go. He is hiding in a sub-basement, believe it or not. This is Bill. He is a survivalist and a loner who adopts and fortifies this entire town. He cuts down trees, he digs holes, he makes traps, and he cooks a mean steak.
Yeah, he does.
4 years pass, and one of Bill's traps are triggered. Bill notices this from one of his monitors, and he goes to handle it. Turns out it is a man named Frank trying to make his way to Boston. Bill helps him out of the hole, checks that he's not infected through one of the testers that we've seen multiple times, and he reluctantly agrees to give this man a meal. What then transpires is the greatest post-apocalyptic meet cute ever put to film, in my humble estimation. Dinners, Linda Ronstadt jam sessions, and kisses are exchanged. More years pass, and we see little quarrels, new friends named Tess and Joel, and get the line, paying attention to things is how we show love. Bill's town is attacked by raiders, as predicted earlier by Joel, and Bill is shot. Things don't look good for him, but then we cut to 10 years later. Bill and Frank are very much alive and older. Frank is wheelchair-bound and appears to be sick. The next morning, Frank announces this is his last day, leaving Bill devastated. They have one last beautiful day together and go out in a very Romeo and Juliet-esque fashion. Present-day Joel and Ellie arrive at the familiar gates to Bill's town and let themselves in. They eventually find a note from Bill explaining everything. Bill has left Joel his truck, a means to charge a car battery, and gives him free reign of his armory and supplies. Our duo showers, resupplies, and heads off to Wyoming in search of Joel's brother Tommy, as Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt plays us out.
Wonderful summary. I don't agree with the Romeo and Juliet comment.
Why is that?
Why? Because Romeo and Juliet had pressures. No, that's what the fuck does that even mean? But
star-crossed lovers. That's from Romeo and Juliet.
I know, but this was a choice. This was a full 100% choice on both of their parts. They were satisfied and happy. They had lived this life together. They had the choice to do this. Romeo and Juliet had outside pressures and familial, judgment and obligations that they couldn't escape. That's a different dynamic. So,
all right.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Fair point.
So,
I was just trying to have some evocative imagery. That's all.
Yes.
So, yeah. What an episode, huh?
Yes. And right off the gate, I just want everyone to know. And I fucking forgot to bring tissues. But I almost hyperventilated watching this show both times. and cried so bad even doing the notes that I had to, like, walk away, and which is why it took an extra amount of time. This was one of the most emotional anythings I've ever seen, not just TV series episode. I mean, this covers movies, like, just everything. So,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to just get into this, but, to do that, there was no cold open in this episode, so it just went right into credits,
Sure did.
which I found interesting because we have, 2 out of 2 episodes with the cold open, and then the 3rd doesn't have a cold open, but spends the majority of the time in a flashback, which that was interesting because both episodes 1 and 2 started with flashbacks. So, I like what they're doing, and they're a little unpredictable, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to me for no cold open on this one, just because
Yeah.
it's tough to figure out where you would put the break for the
Yeah.
credits. That
Mhm.
makes sense, because you would think, like, everything flows so naturally into the next scene that to
Mhm.
put a hard break there, like, I really like the shot of the piece of clothing that triggers the flashback.
Yeah.
It like goes that's kind of where you would put, I think,
Sure.
the cold, that's, but
Yeah.
then you might lose that connection of, like, that dress or whatever, the
Mhm.
scarf or whatever we were looking at is on this woman. And
Mhm.
so I think it was smart to just go for it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree. And that's the other thing. I think they're just making so many conscious decisions
Mhm.
with every part and every nuanced section of the story that they're telling us. They're not just like, just it's fine. People will get it. They'll still feel it. They're very concerned about the flow and the pacing and the impact.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
It
So
is something we've seen this if you just take other top tier HBO properties as well in recent memory. There
sure.
have been episodes of Game of Thrones that go right into the credits. There have been episodes of things like Westworld.
Mhm.
Westworld is a show that notoriously loves to play with time and flashbacks and not confuse you, but make you guess where you are.
Mhm.
And they would often do that type of setup in a cold open. But the indicator of, like, a heavy Westworld episode was like, oh, no cold open this week. We're getting right
Eh.
into it. And so
Mhm.
I think that's kind of the same situation here. It's like a very impactful episode.
Mhm.
So let's not interrupt this beautiful contained story we've told here.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And let's get into that beautifully contained story. We are 10 miles west of Boston. I'm using quotations with that. But Joel is washing his wound in a river on his hand, and it's early morning, so around dawn. And Joel takes a moment here and builds a rock cairn, which we assumed was a memorial for Tess. Could
Mhm.
be, I mean, I think we were spitballing quickly and we were just saying could be a signifier to other people or, even Bill and Frank, depending on how far they wander, which we learned is not far at all. But um, uh, I have not listened to episode 3 of the podcast yet, but Craig did confirm that it was kind of this memorial for Tess.
Oh, cool. All right.
So that was beautiful. After this, Joel treks through the woods and gets back to Ellie, and she's sitting by a tree, and his jacket is keeping her warm, which is a
Mhm.
wonderful thing, and that translates to both of the games, and that's all I'll say there. But the silence is thick here between them, and Joel takes a quick bite of food before tossing the rest over to Ellie, and of course he does this in silence. And Ellie states that she's never been in the forest before, and it's pretty damn buggy, and yes, it is, girl. And Ellie, proceeds to lay it out for Joel here that everyone consciously made their own choices getting into this situation. So Tess's death is not her fault. And Joel remains silent and just says that we have a 5-hour hike to Bill's. And then we just kind of start moving out of their campsite for the evening and into this lush, beautiful greenery of the forest. And they even show a wide shot of them crossing this very beautiful rusted bridge in a local park. That's all I
Mhm.
can guess. And as they progress, Ellie is Ellie. She gets curious. Has Joel been through this particular route a lot? Are there lots of infected? How are Bill and Frank? And Frank is nice, Bill not so much.
Right.
But Yeah, and then she proceeds to ask Joel about a scar on his forehead, and Joel just quickly, just gives her the high level beats, much like Andrew does at the start of these episodes. With someone shot at him, but they missed, and Joel shot back at them, but he also missed because that's the reality of how things like that often go in real life.
That
And
that might be just a very funny reference to this game as well, into to the games as well,
oh
where
yeah,
the aiming
oh
mechanics in
yeah,
a Naughty Dog or even an Uncharted game that's not what they're known for. And so
no,
it is easy to miss a lot
yeah.
in the game. So I laughed a little bit harder at that line. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it progresses from there to like, do you just suck at shooting or in general?
Right. It was,
And
yeah,
he's
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
in general. Like, I just, I'm
It's
much,
Ellie essentially saying, get good, you know?
yeah. Meanwhile, she's, yeah. So, um, from there, Ellie peeps the pistol by Joel's belt, and she once again tries to reason that, of course, she needs a weapon because
Yeah.
it's just them. And then we come to the Cumberland Farms gas station, which is also a convenience store. And there was some talk that this was primarily a Canadian thing, but I did quick little Google, and where Andrew and I live in Pennsylvania,
We have
yeah,
those.
there's Cumberland Farms around us, so it's not limited to Canada. So
Yeah.
if anybody was upset or worried about that, don't worry. All right, so and as they head into the gas station convenience store, Ellie is proud that she is a curious cat and asking all the questions despite Joel's absolute like just exhaustion with it already. But Joel explains why they're stopping here because they've stashed supplies along the way on certain routes, and Ellie hears just a little bit of that before she makes a beeline for Mortal Kombat 2, an arcade video game. And just kind of talks a little bit about the significance of the story behind this game and how she wished very much she would play it. And I will talk more about that, remember, in the spoiler section at the end of our shows, because this
Yes.
has a direct tie to the video games and the DLC. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But after that, Ellie goes to explore for more supplies, and Joel just keeps on with the just you about whether or not there's anything bad in there. And I love that he's doubling down on that joke. I really do.
Hmm.
And Ellie discovers a hatch, and Joel kind of checks in periodically, half heartedly here, as he's just trying to pin down where he buried his own stash. And Ellie is staring down into a black hole, which I felt very uneasy with. And my instinct was absolutely the fuck not. But she fires up her flashlight, and we see it's not too deep. And then we get a view of her just kind of, slowly dropping down into it as she begins looking around. And there is a box of unopened, sealed tampons on the shelf.
Hmm.
And I almost came off the couch in absolute joy, because for people with wayfaring who have come from wayfaring strangers, you know exactly what I'm going to say when we get to the chatter section. But for right now, just know that I was very appreciative of that moment. But
Yep.
Ellie gets distracted by the sound of an infected, and a collapsed wall trapped said infected, and it is not quite a clicker yet, but not quite a runner anymore. Joel is
Hmm.
still upstairs doing his own thing, finding his long lost stash, and then we get back to Ellie, and she opens her switchblade, flips that bitch open, and the infected tracks it with a very sickly, disturbing yellow eye. And then she kind of, again, she has this curiosity to her character, and
Sure.
she takes and seizes this opportunity that it can't attack her. There is no fervent chase or anything, and she slices a line into its forehead, and we see mycelium beneath the dermis. And this is one of the, I will never get over how creepy this is. They did this in episode 2, and now they're doing it again here in an even closer manner.
Sure.
It's disgusting. Side note, and I don't know if anyone's going to agree with me on this, but the infected, the actor, kind of reminded me of BJ Novak from The Office and a bunch of other things, but primarily for me. Yeah.
Sure.
I was like,
Okay.
is that BJ? But
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
didn't check because we all love a mystery. But Ellie pauses a moment, and we can tell that, like you can actually see her heart beating fast in her throat at this moment before she stabs the infected in this very quiet rage, thus killing it. And then it goes back to Joel, and he notices that Ellie's been a little quiet, hasn't been asking any questions or making a peep whatsoever. So he starts to call for her. And as he stands, he winces slightly. And I love this because he's supposed to be 56 years old in the game. And I get it. Yeah, I get it. But he draws his weapon, and right at that moment, she emerges from the door and shines the tampon box quickly with a little sassy note, a little victorious note, and then she shoves them into her backpack. Joel places the toolbox beneath the floorboards again, along with the assault rifle, because he says that there's not much ammo, so this is kind of a waste. And Ellie has attempt number 2,324 to gain a gun, but is, of course, shot down, pun
Yep.
intended. But before we hit the road with these two again, let's just talk a little bit about a few things. So, Ellie speaking up on her behalf in that moment in the forest still with Joel. So, this is slightly different from in the game. And again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think it fits in line with the deviations of her character that we've been talking about, or me that I've been talking about the last two episodes.
Yeah.
So, I found this a much more believable and balanced version of Ellie in this episode, that like in comparison to episodes 1 and 2. But what were your thoughts on her kind of like having that moment of, this isn't my fault, like, don't, be quiet towards me, and have this kind of like ire just building up, thinking that I did something wrong here when you all made those choices?
I think it shows kind of a very interesting emotional intelligence from her
Mhm.
in that, like, and also just the need for things not to be uncomfortable for
For
what will
sure.
be a very long trip,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even in a car in the best conditions, it's
Mhm.
a long way
Yeah.
from 10 miles outside of Boston to
To
Wyoming.
Wyoming. Yeah.
So the first part of that is essentially, I think she has tried to talk about Tess,
Mhm.
right? Or
Mhm.
at least, she seemed to be stricken during the end of the last episode where everything happened. Joel just walks
Walks
away, as we
away.
had discussed, and she kind of stands there and she's like, I cannot believe that just happened.
Mhm.
We could see that she didn't want to leave Tess. She was literally being dragged away.
Yeah.
From someone she had made a genuine connection with in a very short amount of time, I think.
Mhm.
And realizing that Joel might not be the kind of person who wants to express his feelings about that sort of thing, but also might hold a grudge about that sort of thing. So she's
Hmm.
just like, I think she's just laying it out on the table. She's like, look, man, don't put this on me.
Mhm.
Right? This
Mhm.
is not, it's like, you signed up for this. You did not have to do this. I did not twist your arm, right? I'm 14 years old.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really liked, I agree with you. I like that aspect of it is a shorthand to tell us a lot about Ellie, that
Mhm.
she is a forward person, that
Yeah.
she speaks her mind, that she is she's a direct to the heart of the matter type of character.
Yeah.
And also is a great play off of this kind of strong silent protagonist, not silent, but mostly silent protagonist we've had so far.
Yeah. I I agree, indubitably.
Indubitably, as we
Indubitably.
say. Yeah.
And this is just something I've been seeing on social media, but I certainly noticed this because I'm a detail kind of person when it comes to
Mhm.
the video games, and specifically, but now the TV show in its own way. But this mention of Joel's scar on his forehead is placed on the right side, like right around here, on off to the right on his forehead. So in the game, on his the left side of his head, he has kind of like a red line for in part 1, and in part 2 it is a scar. It's a definitive scar on his forehead. It
Mhm.
is never once brought up by either him or Ellie or anyone else in either games 1 or 2. But there's this thing happening that people have been pointing out, and I've certainly noticed it, but again, I don't need to, like, bullhorn every single one of my thoughts because we have a podcast, and I'm like, "Ugh, if I say this, then people are gonna be like, 'You already talked about it, Jack.'" But, um, this mirror imaging of things. Everything that like, certain key elements in the video game are mirrored on the opposite side in the show.
Mhm.
And there's this talk that it's a recreation, or excuse me, it's an adaptation, not a recreation.
Mhm.
So, for example, when in episode 1, when Joel, Tommy, and Sarah are getting away from the house, the burning farm is on the left hand in the show, but in the game, it's on the right hand. When Joel is carrying Sarah, she is holding on to him. Her head is by the left side of his body. In the game, it's the right side of his body. And now
Interesting.
this scar that's on Joel's head is on the left side of him, and in the show, it's on the right. So everything seems to be like left, right switched.
Hmm.
And I think it's a very again, these conscious decisions that are being made by, Craig and Neil and everyone else involved making the show to basically say that we're not trying to undo or recreate anything with the games, because they existed first and they will always be what they are. This is just, an adaptation of that. And if that's true, oh, chef's kiss.
I have nothing to say about that,
Mhm.
other than I just find that to be fascinating.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not something that you would ever notice
Mhm.
had you not played the games, and me, I did not even notice it having played the games.
Yeah.
So, um, it felt right.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of this gets worked out in storyboarding, right? Where you're
Sure.
like, what's the best way? Because
To
again,
shoot something.
yeah, in a
Yeah.
game, you have essentially free reign of the laws of physics don't apply to a thing
Yeah.
like a camera, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
you could just go whatever direction you want.
Sure.
So in the show, I just feel like they probably in storyboarding, they were like, we're gonna have some troubles here, so like let's flip the house to the other side.
Mhm.
Um,
Lighting, time of
yeah,
day.
realistically, the way we want for instance, like the way we want Pedro to fall while
Mhm.
holding Sarah, you know, it could just be like an actor choice, like, oh, I'd be more comfortable like rolling into my
Sure.
right side. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like just little stuff like that. I feel
Mhm.
like, there's all sorts of logistical things,
Yeah.
but I guess it will be interesting to see what else is like, what just went from like the left to the right or like red to green or something, something like that. That'd be
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I mucked up one of those details. So in the game, when Joel is carrying Sarah, she's on his right. In the show, it's on his Sarah's on his left.
Yeah.
However, in the game and in the show, when Sarah dies and Joel cradles her, she is always on the left. Like he's holding her first and foremost with his left arm.
Yeah. That's
So
very,
yeah,
you know.
I think a moment like that, people have been like, whereas the other stuff, is just a little bit easier to hide behind details or necessities given lighting, time of day, etc. for filming. But anyway,
Sure.
um,
That's very Renaissance, like that pose of holding somebody that just
yeah.
feels very reminiscent of things we've seen in art,
Oh, sure.
classical art. So,
For
yeah.
sure. So you said, and I might have just messed this detail up. I heard Joel say we have about a 5-hour hike to
Mhm.
Bill's. Did he specify 10 miles? Because I wrote here, I'm like, Billstown is then roughly 30 miles west of Boston. Because if they're already 10 miles west, which
Yeah.
they tell us at the open, and if
Correct.
you estimate a 5-hour hike to be roughly, taken at 4 miles an hour, then it's an additional 20 miles to get to Billstown.
I probably messed that up.
Okay. I
So
wasn't sure,
I was
but
maybe
yeah.
confusing the 10 miles of the opening with whatever, but I do remember the 5-hour hike
Yeah.
number. And Ellie
Okay.
said, oh, we could do that. So yeah,
Sure.
it's great.
Yeah, so they have about it's like a 30-mile trek from Boston to where Bill lives. And again, this is just a little quick note, but I like being oriented like geographically
Sure.
to follow along with this journey.
It's great.
Just for more than one reason, but I like it. So,
Mhm.
internet sleuths, let's figure out where Bill lived. So, well, it said Lincoln, right? Is that a real place? I didn't even check. But so Ellie and Joel, I talked a lot about this in episode 2, but Ellie and Joel were way more balanced in episode 3. Their conversations, their energies, they felt way more evenly matched, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I didn't get any of those kind of like that just innate attitude, that not even like innate attitude, but almost like a nasty attitude that happened in episode 2. It was much more relaxed and she was much more curious than anything else, which, again, I have to let go of that dissonance of game Ellie versus show Ellie, but it was just it was over the top in episode 2. But for me, episode 3, it was perfect from start to finish. The way that they spoke to one another, the way they interacted. And I said to you, even at the end of last week's episode, I was like, maybe things will change and be more balanced because Tess isn't around. And I think that that certainly contributed to that.
Yeah, I feel like that just softened a couple edges, the loss of Tess for both of them. They're both feeling things, but they're also, Tess was that buffer, I think, between the two of them. And now they're feeling her absence. Truly. Yeah.
Yeah. And even more so as the episode proceeds, but we'll get there. Quick note, Ellie being a teenager and finding a video game, our arcade video game, was so refreshing. I mean, it was a very grounding moment for a 14-year-old girl living in a world, and we talk about this all the time on Wayfaring, like, none of us can imagine what a world like this would be like. And for her to just have that moment of like just a snap of exhilaration, seeing that was it was joyful. And I loved it.
Shout out to Mortal Kombat 2,
Yes.
Melina, a real character in a real video game, all accurate. So great.
I love it. I don't know anything about that. So Andrew, thank you.
Verified factual evidence. Nicely done.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Nicely done. So Ellie finding tampons. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. We did a bonus show. We had a lovely listener who was one of our ride or dies right into the show talking about how it's unrealistic, how zombie apocalypse or nuclear apocalypse, just all the apocalypses never talk about the realities of having a period, which would absolutely still happen. And I made a comment on our bonus show earlier in January when that episode dropped, talking responding to our listener who wrote in about something I had said on the show a year ago around the same topic. So it was just like all the way down kind of conversation. And I was like, it would take nothing at all to just show the reality of, like, I think I said on the show, she just grabs them and it's just like, oh, cool, and puts them in her backpack. Or Joel sees them and it's just like, oh, here, and then move on with your life. It doesn't have to be this big. It really is no fuss, no muss. But this is a reality, and to see that in this fucking show, I'm literally, I almost fell off the couch. I was like, I'm so happy. That's all I needed. Thank you. Thank you, HBO and Craig and Neil. Like, thank you for just doing that little thing for bringing reality to people who have menstrual cycles. Appreciate it. So
another piece of media, another piece of recent media that touches on that. I'll just say very briefly, if you haven't watched it, it's well worth your time. Yellow Jackets, not post-apocalypse, but just touches on that exact thing. Also, well worth your time. Go watch Yellow Jackets if you appreciate a little bit of reality in your.
Yeah, for sure.
I won't say post-apocalypse, but isolation. Yeah.
I mean, although, and I don't want to split hairs whatsoever here. But like Yellow Jack is a predominantly female story. So like it was all women, people who have menstrual cycles isolated together. And if they didn't touch on that, it would be a fucking joke.
That's true. Fair point.
Yeah. But my point is, it shouldn't take just a group of menstruating people to talk about it. That's all.
No, I get that. Yeah, you can imagine a show though where also you would have a group of 10, 12 women, not that long ago where that isn't touched on at
That's
all,
true.
right? It's not, it's an appreciated detail. I'll say that.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there, folks.
We're getting there.
Yeah. We just want to talk about the infected in the close up here and just how nasty it was. The last 2 talking points are going to be about this. I mean, the tendrils, the mycelium, the actual fungal growth breaking through the right eye, and even one strand coming through the cheek.
Yeah.
It was, and there was even goo, like yellow goo between the smaller mushroom type plates on the cheek. I would not survive this, Andrew. Like,
I mean, you survived this one. There's no way for him
well,
to
yeah,
get you.
that's true.
It's
That's
great.
true. And that no, you're right. However, I mean this whole like fungal apocalypse in general. Like the yesterday our daughter and I went for an hour-long walk and like 3 or 4 helicopters flew over us, which has been more than normal lately around where we live. And I every time one passed by, I looked at her and I was like, "Fungal apocalypse." And she was like, "Stop.
It's
Stop it."
starting. It's
Yeah.
starting.
So,
I hope you enjoy our last walk together.
that's horrible. Don't see that. But yeah, um, it was something else, and I know, and I apologize, I cannot remember his name. I took a screenshot and I tried to find it and I lost it. But the same makeup artist who did Vecna on Stranger Things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd been reading that. He's widely considered to be like the best in the biz, you
Oh,
know.
he has to be. Look at what we were looking at. It literally made me
Oh yeah,
oh,
no, I'm not trying to disprove that he's the best. It's just like everybody's like, oh yeah, you need like realistic. That's the
yeah.
guy. You need
Yeah.
realistic prosthetic, whatever. Just call him.
Yeah.
It's good to be that guy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or
Fully agree.
girl, whatever. Yeah.
And we will figure out the name. I apologize for being bad hosts. And last talking point, and this is kind of a big one, but we can't talk too much about it because it has too much implications for the future of the Last of Us story.
Yeah.
But Ellie killing the infected. So I used the quiet rage when I was covering it earlier.
Mhm.
But there's this anger already building in her. And it's likely been there for years, given the fact that she is an orphan. She was shipped off to military boarding school with Fedra. Never even knew Marlene until a couple days ago, and questioned if she was even her mother. Like, she has so many unresolved issues with her own personal life, not even dealing with, the bite that does not kill her. So, and now all this journey is underway with, this kind of silent, miserable older person, and Joel is just not an easy man to be around for anyone, but like certainly not a 14-year-old girl.
How
And
dare you?
excuse me, if I love Joel more than anyone, so
Sure.
but I can recognize that that would be hard for anyone. And I think that this is the first in uh very many building blocks that exhibits this rage that Ellie possesses, but
Hmm.
also has links to how she got infected, the immediate aftermath of that, and who she shared it with. But that's really all we can talk about because we promise no spoilers.
No spoilies.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah.
But I'm glad that they're establishing this, is my point.
Her. It is a little grotesque.
Sure.
Is the word. Her behavior, I think, not. I mean, yes, it's obviously
Yeah.
to just slice a thing apart, but it is like it had me thinking. It had when you combine this with the look in her eyes at the end of the first episode when
Mhm.
Joel is literally beating someone to death, right?
Yeah.
And what is happening here,
Mhm.
there is, in my estimation, cause for concern,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
About her mental well-being. I'll
Sure.
just leave it at that.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, this is like kind of dark for like a kid. Like you hear stories about, that's serial killers or whatever, like,
Mhm.
starting on small animals, that sort
Sure.
of, that's kind of what it felt like to me. Like it
Mm.
was very clinical, right? There was no like, it was
She
like,
wasn't delighting in it.
right. But
Yeah.
it wasn't actually having uh,
An
I
aversion.
don't think the desired effect of like, ooh, like, that
Yeah.
wasn't happening either.
Mhm.
So that is kind of where I come down on that. Like it was an opportunity, in my opinion, to assess these things as safely as you possibly could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe this goes back to her saying like, does it make it hard for you to, what did she say? The exact word, like that they were people once, right?
Yeah. Kill them.
Whatever this is, it's not a person. Like when it gets cut across the forehead, it does not react to this at all,
Mhm.
right? It literally just, the eye continues to focus in a very disturbing way.
Sure.
And I think that maybe is just um her way of processing, or saying like, I don't, it's like, maybe this isn't a real this, it was a person, but it is no longer. They're not in there anymore.
Mhm.
But it is a very creepy way to put that to the test. I'll say that much.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
And there were several people on, Twitter specifically talking about how this is excuse me, this is the first time Ellie kills an infected and Joel does not know about it. And going back to her saying like, "Have you ever killed one?" You know?
Yeah.
So, I think while I don't necessarily think this was a "I gotta prove myself" moment because he's not even around,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think, there's a lot of layers to this of that growing rage, that grotesque lack of response
Mhm,
to
mhm.
how grotesque it was, and also her kind of challenging herself to see if she could do it. And
Yeah.
and I think oh, I mean, it was just beautifully done, honestly, the whole sequence, it was scary, but, a lot of things in this game are gonna be scary, but beautiful.
This was the scariest part of an otherwise,
Mhm.
pretty lovely little
For sure.
episode of television, so
Yeah.
I'll take it, I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You're up next.
All right, we're gonna be outside, we're hiking, we're
Mhm.
on the road, as it were.
Yes.
We're walking along a pretty disheveled type of road situation. Ellie spots a crashed plane in the field, and holy shit, holy shit. She asks Joel if he ever flew on a plane. It's like a very funny back and forth.
Mm.
It gets dark pretty fast though, with Joel like giving Ellie perspective on the obvious dangers of flying.
Yeah.
Like he said, Joel made it like, "Oh, I didn't really care for it. Like the few times that I flew, a handful of times, whatever." And
Mhm.
then she's like, "Dude, you were in the sky," and he's
Yeah.
like, "So were they, right?" And so like,
Yeah.
just really more ways than one grounding things, right?
Yes.
Ellie and Joel talk about Outbreak Day and how quickly everything went to shit. Ellie's best guess was that it was a monkey, which is very funny because, again, I don't think she would have seen the movie Outbreak, right? But it
No.
is
No.
maybe, I don't know what the world is like in her school or wherever she was raised, but just very funny.
Mhm.
Um, but the best guess is that cordyceps mutated and it was in the flour and the sugar. So
Mhm.
you're talking about bread, cereal, pancake mix, basically all of the things we saw in episode one.
Mhm.
Um, and in 3 days, it all went to shit. And I thought the way that Joel described it was so haunting. It was like,
Yeah.
it got shipped on a Thursday, people ate it on Friday, and by Monday the world was over, or
Yeah.
everything was gone, like whatever he said. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like
Mhm.
bam. And it's like that really puts it in perspective, like how quickly the switch flipped, right?
Yeah.
Um, they're moving forward. Uh, Joel says we should probably cut through this thing. There's something up here I don't want you to see.
Yeah.
Ellie, being Ellie, was like, hell with that. Let's go. Um, and she pushes onward. We see a mass grave. Bones, suitcases, clothing, all just personal effects all over the place.
Yeah.
We learn that a week after Outbreak Day, the soldiers evacuated small towns, and if the QZs were full, then we find out that the military shot and killed non-infected people. Ellie asks, why? Why would you kill people that weren't infected? And Joel
Mm.
says, dead people can't become infected. And that is a very, very dark, but possibly honest reading of what may happen,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
this situation.
Alright, so, yeah, I mean, I know some of these sections are a little bit smaller than the other ones, but,
Sure.
um, just I wanna talk about the comment on about the pancake mix real quick, because there was a slight hesitation in Joel's voice before he even said pancake mix, and he thought about Sarah.
It's true.
And this is something that we kind of go back and forth on over on Wayfair, and like, does he do these little things just trigger quick memories and then he processes in lightning fast speed and then moves on? I think that was a case of that here for sure. just to kind of recounting and simplifying what happened.
Yeah.
Because why draw it out, essentially?
It's like, hey, get back in the box, you.
Yeah,
Get back in the
100%.
box. Just telling the memory itself, like, hey, you don't belong here, you know? One of
Yeah,
those types of situations.
truly. Next quick comment is Ellie's mention of flying. So, this we're gonna talk a little bit more in the spoiler section of the game.
Yeah.
But this is an important attribute to
Mhm.
Miss Ellie, and, I liked it. And that's all I can kind of say,
Yeah.
because again, it's tough to not give things away because there's so much of this story that is so beautiful and to watch it unfold
Yeah.
for people who just don't know is wonderful. So I'll stop there. But
It is just to again to not veer into spoiler territory, and really we don't know a lot about what they're going to do. I
sure.
mean, based on how drastically the characters we have seen in this episode have been
Mhm.
altered, right?
Yeah.
It is fascinating to be a person who grew up in this world like she did, right? Who is aware at one point there were airplanes in the sky, but
Yeah.
will very likely never be in one, right?
Mhm.
To be
Yeah.
aware that we have accomplished amazing things that
Mhm.
she may never take part in,
Yeah.
right? Uh that is pretty, she played that really well is what I'll
Mhm.
say. I thought
Sure.
that that was really a moment of genuine excitement from Bella, and
Mhm.
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. With you and kind of not so much in relation, but not completely unrelated. But the progression of Joel and Ellie's relationship, I think, is moving a little bit faster than I anticipated
Mhm.
in the show. But I think it works well considering the alternative would be weird and silent. In a video game, no, stay with me. In a video
I'm
game,
with you. I know. Yeah.
you're controlling Joel for most
Yeah.
of the game in part 1. And you're with him and you're making him run to this corner and check for supplies and you're making him fight this, this style fighting or sneak this kind of thing. So you're not really focusing on, "Oh, I need to talk to this kid." You're
Right.
focused on keeping your character alive and progressing through the level, essentially. That doesn't translate to TV shows or movies. So I think they had to bring them like, they had to let him open up a little bit more and faster than they did in the game. But yeah, I think the pacing would be way off if they didn't do that. So I think it's working out great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the video game, I could run around a car for 3 hours if I wanted to, and
Truly.
Ellie wouldn't say anything to me.
Nothing. Nothing.
Whereas if,
Right now, she'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing, dude?"
oh, I'm not going with this guy anymore.
Yeah.
This guy is unhinged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gave you the next section because the first one was just super short, so.
Sure, yeah. We're in the flashback, which was, again, I have to shout out to the cinematographer. I mean, obviously shout out to everyone on this episode, but I think the
Mhm.
cinematographer and the lighting department really did something very special with this episode.
Yeah.
We transition, there is a rainbow blanket that we see that's on the ground in this pit that Ellie was just looking at,
Mhm.
and then it's a snap cut to that exact blanket, um, with a woman and her child. She's wrapping her child in this blanket, and they're getting onto a truck, which is military. We assume it's Fedra, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so we see it then cuts to these cameras that are posted outside of like a really quite nice house. You're like, wow, this is pretty nice.
Mhm.
And a man is sitting in front of monitors of these cameras watching the evacuation underway,
Mhm.
right? It's from behind, it's a profile. It's a really beautiful shot. Soldiers are above him and he's waiting in silence. He's got a rifle or a shotgun like right here, like dude is ready to move if
Yeah.
need be, right?
Mhm.
And we hear the soldiers like muffled but through the ceiling say like the basement's clear, and like they are in a basement and he is below them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like really expertly done. We'll see in a minute. He calls them New World Order jackboot fucks,
My
which
fave.
is a line that only Nick Offerman could deliver, I think.
Truly. Truly.
Great insult. Great insult. The trucks leave and pass an evacuation sign. Bill emerges from beneath a false cabinet. Really awesome. It's reminiscent of the new Halloween film,
Yes.
the Danny McBride Halloween, how light spoilers, Laurie Strode has a panic room in her house.
Mhm.
Very similar setup. That's all I'll say.
Sure.
A lot of similarities between these two characters. He comes outside. He has a shotgun in his hand. He's got a gas mask on, and he is ready to get shit done. This is a man who is determined.
Yeah.
Everyone's gone, right?
Mhm.
We get a wide shot of the town, and it is empty. There is no one left, which was very cool.
Yeah.
So we get our first needle drop. I'm coming home to stay by none other than Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. So that's great. Bill's montage, we get this really great montage, and it's very cool. We see this really nice blue and white truck. I know Joel later calls it a piece of shit. I kind of like this truck. I have a soft spot for it, right?
So do I.
He hitches a boat. Like, he goes and steals, I guess it's his neighbor's boat. It doesn't look like it was in his yard. He goes and steals one of his neighbor's boats, hitches it to the truck. He breaks into a bunch of stores. He is filling up barrels of gasoline. And it was just a very funny moment, but he hits 93 for the octane. I was like,
Yeah.
I love that. Like, why not get the most expensive gasoline? That's probably the one that's the most full, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right.
Goes to the Home Depot, stocks up. It is a very Ron Swanson moment, if you're familiar with Nick Offerman's other famous character.
I know more than you.
I know more than you. Go away. In the Home Depot, the power goes out, and he says out loud to no one in particular, "That was fast."
Yeah.
So he goes to a couple things happen. One, he gets a big ass generator for himself, which is what we find out the gasoline is for. Yeah. He then goes to, I think it's the natural gas plant, and he opens up a valve, right? So that the gas continues to flow. They shut off the gas to all of the homes as well. So there's that.
Yeah.
And he goes to the wine and spirits store because why the hell not, right? Yeah. From there, he takes over the town. He builds a wired fence. Like I said, he fortifies this place. He's booby traps, digging deep holes with, putting like mud over them and leaves and stuff like that. It's everything you can imagine. Then gardening, hunting, and then we end with like a fantastic meal, rounds out his adventure. I was just like, clearly he's a very capable human being.
Sure is.
In such a short amount of time, we learn, oh man, this guy is not to be trifled with. He was clearly preparing for something like this before this, right?
For sure.
We hear a buzzer sound, and we watch on a security camera. It's a great cut. There's an infected, and he's sitting there at his table eating a steak, and he's like, "Come on," right? And this thing hits a tripwire, and a shotgun swings around and knocks it over, and he goes, "Oh." It was really, really, really well done.
Yeah, never gets old.
Yeah. And then we just see like this guy's living large. He's living his best life.
Yeah.
With no one, which begs the question of what kind of person was he maybe before the apocalypse happened?
Well, let's kind of lead with that before we get into the notes. What did you... I mean, we know right off the bat that he's a survivalist or a prepper, whatever you want to call it. He literally had a bunker beneath his basement.
Sure.
So, he had some sort of employment that afforded him the money to make that, like to have that construction and fortified.
That's an interesting thing. Now, here's what I will press back very lightly about this.
Press back all you want.
It is noted at least in two different moments, or maybe one, but I can't remember. That is his mom's house. That is not his house.
Okay.
So this is a person who is living at home, right? And I believe he's probably taking care of somebody who was not well, right?
Yeah.
But I also don't believe I didn't believe once that he really had like potentially gainful employment, right? Maybe he worked at the
Interesting.
Home Depot or something like that, but I feel like the mindset of him as a person doing these things and
Sure.
having this underground quite literally a bunker with codes and shit.
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of like a one-track mind.
Yeah, you can't, like, have a 9 to 5 and be a prepper
Yeah, I
to
don't he
that level.
yeah, I don't we find out later there's an offhanded mention of friends, right?
Mhm.
Um, and like I don't think he had any. I think he had his mom and he talked to no other neighbors, right?
That
That's
makes me
kind of my
so sad
impression
for
of
Bill.
yeah, well, no, I mean, self-imposed. You
Yeah.
know, for whatever reason, this was a person who was very much and just he slips into this world like a glove, right? It's like a
Yeah.
well-worn shoe for him. He's like, it's when the people get carted away, my Bill take when I look at him and he pulls that mask up for the first time, to me, that face says, finally,
Yeah.
finally, these people are gone.
Yeah. Well,
And
even in the note we'll discuss later on, he's like, "I was happy everyone fucking died."
right, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he does
Mhm.
say that, but yeah, that's like,
Oof.
you know, can a person who feels that way like
Have a
check you
job.
out at Home Depot? I don't know. Right? Are
Yeah.
they able to have that? So,
Mhm.
um it seems the two things I could take away is like Bill was a loner, and I think Bill family wise was well off. I don't think he needed to have a job because I think based on the house, how
Sure.
nice it was,
Mhm.
and the things that they had, he he probably wanted for nothing.
Yeah. I agree. I didn't even consider that even though, they talk about the antique piano and it was his mother's and it was
Mhm.
his mother's music and even all the pictures around the house are much older.
Yeah, that is not
Even
the way I think
yeah,
he would like decorate.
no.
Like the bunker is very much a reflection of Bill, right?
Sure.
Everything above the sub basement is
Mhm.
just that was his mom's.
But I do think he appreciated the elegance of it.
Yeah. Oh no, I think that yeah, there is something about yeah,
Mhm.
the plates, right? The
Sure.
silverware. It is
The
a life
presentation, yeah.
it is a life that he is accustomed to. Clearly he was, you know, he was cooking for
Mhm.
someone, probably his mom, right?
Sure.
Um and so he has a taste for the finer things. He knows how to pair wine and what to pair wine with, right? That
Yeah.
is not a thing. That's not a thing that you guess at. Like, what wine goes good with rabbit? You could ask a person, right?
I
I
don't
don't,
fucking know.
I don't. Probably a red of some kind. They said it on the episode. I still don't know what it was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, uh, he is he's a complicated character. I mean, this is far more information than we ever got about Bill in the game,
For
right?
sure.
This
Yeah.
is a fully realized human being that has
Mhm.
a backstory that
Mhm.
we can only kind of guess at.
Yeah.
But I love what they have done here.
Yeah.
It makes him a very like complex person to try to like anticipate or understand. It's
Mhm.
great. It's great.
Mhm. And I just like side note, I want to talk about Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett.
Yeah,
So Murray Bartlett, who plays Frank, and Nick Offerman plays Bill. A lot of who they are in real life came into their characters in
sure.
certain ways. So, just the woodworking. Not necessarily. I don't think Nick Offerman's a prepper. I could be wrong. I don't know, but um, I mean that man can build a canoe from scratch.
Yeah.
Like, he knows what he is doing in a woodcraft shop and in general creating things with his hands. So it was so believable and it translated so beautifully in the
Yeah.
episode to see him put things together, create traps, even growing his own food to an extent. But I think he did that part because he had to. He had to
Mhm.
fucking eat. Now, when Frank comes along, and we're gonna get there, and I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but um, Frank brings this, like, earthiness to the role and or to the perspective to Bill of, like, you're surrounded by the finer things, but you're living in a prison essentially. Like,
Sure.
let me show you how beautiful life can be. And in real life, Murray Bartlett talks about how, if he wasn't an actor, he would be doing something in nature. He would be growing something, working with like the natural elements essentially that are available to all of us that we just, most of the time turn our backs to.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and that's a beautiful thing because of what we see in this episode. Like, he grows this strawberry garden, and I can't even talk about that yet. We'll get to it, but it's it's these two characters that were imbued with the reality of the actors in certain ways, and I think that enhanced it so much more than it otherwise could have been by anyone else playing these roles. So,
Yeah.
just a little side note.
During that montage, I was like, they did, this was just a day in the life of Nick Offerman, you know?
Yeah,
Like, that's kind of what it felt like to me. Like,
sure.
it's really, he just seems like a person who's like very much in charge of his destiny and his fate. Like,
Yeah.
power plant, you shut me off, I'll go to the power plant and turn that shit right back on,
Yeah. Ain't
So,
gonna fuck with me, yeah.
yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, like, I just love this sequence so much. Like, me personally, I'm a sucker for montages, even
Mm.
though I think what did the movie executives say? That's when they run out of money.
Yeah, montage is French for we ran out of money.
Yeah, like, whatever, I love them. I think that if they're done well, that they just make everything better.
Yeah.
Um, and I think this little bit of his life now and how it proceeded after the military left and what he did to safeguard his home and methodically plan out a future where he could be reasonably comfortable.
Mhm.
It scares me to say this, but it like fully resonated with me. And like I feel like it's time to go like, yes, like deep survivalist mode for me and learn all of the things.
Sure.
Because I have a follow-up comment in at the later part of this episode, but you know, I loved it. I loved it all. But for me, the montage was certainly my favorite part. But what about for you? Like, would would this be a potential plan for you to undertake, given the state of the world being identical to what we see in The Last of Us?
Who would, I mean, sure, with the amount of work that this man does, he secures a town, right? I
Sure
mean,
does.
like, he fences a town,
Mhm.
and it's electric. It's an electric fence, right?
Sure
And
is.
some of the traps we see later on, very practical, right?
Yeah.
But oh my god, they're the work of a deranged individual. Like the chain, the not chainsaw, but like the saw spark flamethrower thing. I was like, I've seen a lot of things in my life in movies, and I was like, I've never seen anything like that.
I know.
I
I
think
kind of want to like get it and lighten it up so we can see more of the detail of it.
yeah,
Mhm.
I think my favorite moment. I think I pointed it out. I really loved him hitting the 93 octane for the. It's like might as well just go right in.
Yeah.
Also, at one point during the back and forth, we see that the purpose of the boat was literally just to fill it with shit.
Yeah.
And so when he's coming back from the Home Depot, you see the boat is literally. I mean, it's full, and he's got the. Like any person who works in construction or any just survivalists or whatever, those straps, those like very
Oh
heavy
yeah,
duty
the
straps, just
crank. Yeah.
holding all of that shit down. I'm like, every little piece of this makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
Like, again, what a character! What a
Yeah.
character!
What a like full introduction to that character specifically.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
true like montage, of course, as we have discussed, but not a lot is said
mhm.
during that. It is a lot of reaction, a lot of quick cuts, but it tells you everything you need to know about him.
It
Like,
really does.
I mean, in very short order, you're like,
Mhm.
all right, I got it. Like by the end, a picture has been painted. You're like, I understand, I
Yeah.
get it.
I see you, Bill. I see you.
I see you, right? But there's
Uh,
more than meets the eye. So
yes, there certainly is, and it's
you
it's beautiful.
Yeah, we've gotten 90% of Bill's story, but there's the rest of the episode tells us about that other 10%, I guess.
Yes. So let's go forward 4 years. We're still in a flashback, but we're forward 4 years into 2007. and we see Bill pulling up to the main gate, and we have our second needle drop of the episode, which is White Room by Cream. Fantastic song. So yes, 4 years have gone by since the world went to hell, and Bill is still thriving. It looks like he's taken up some taxidermy. I mean, I'm assuming we didn't see that in the 2003 era, but we see a taxidermy fox now. So he's keeping himself busy, so that is good. But then all of a sudden, a buzzing alarm sounds, and he is redirecting his focus to a security camera. And he's caught a Frank, but something in one of his landscape booby traps. So he exits his house. He exits through the wired gate, shuts it behind him, and arms himself with a shotgun as he seeks to investigate what this is. And a man's voice comes from the hole. We can't see him yet, just to say, and very definitively, I'm not infected. But Bill questions if he's alarmed, and there's this little comedic moment that happens here where the man in the hole takes too long to answer, and of course Bill points it out. and he's just like, no, But Frank is fairly honest from the get-go. I'm already calling him Frank because we know who he is. It just makes it easier than calling him the man in the hole or the guy or whatever.
Yes.
So Frank is fairly honest here. And he says he's just trying to get to Boston. And he's alone. He left the Baltimore QZ with 10 or 9 other people, but all of them have since died. But Frank, thankfully, is not hurt, and Bill gives him a ladder. But before he lets him exit fully, he tests him for cordyceps, and Frank is negative for cordyceps, so that screen is a bright, beautiful green. And he just basically says, I'm hungry, and is pushing for a meal, despite Bill wanting him to get a move on and go that away.
Yeah,
Boston.
Boston's over there.
Yeah.
He just points.
Yeah. And there's this hilarious interaction again that happens with Arby's, of all places, being thrown into the mix. And basically Bill is saying, if I feed you, then every bum you tell is going to come looking for a free meal like Arby's. And Frank promises not to tell anyone because he's like, Arby's didn't give away free meals. It was a restaurant, man. Yeah. And it's this beautiful, like, meet cute, essentially. That's what I'm gonna call it what it is. But we got 2 back-to-back moments already of like comedic elements, and we know that this is already off to the right foot. But Bill still has a decision to make here, and of course he makes the right one. And we're inside of the house now, and Bill brings Frank a clean pair of clothes as his new guest takes a shower, a hot shower at that, with hot water and steam coming from under the door. And Frank asks for 5 more minutes in the hot water because, of course, it's amazing, and it's probably been 4.5 years or 4 years, depending where we are at in the year since he's last had a hot shower. And Bill seems to react to this after saying yes, but he does this reaction in silence, and I don't know what to call it just yet, but we'll get to that. So the next shot we see is Frank seated as he waits for Bill, who is presumably in the kitchen preparing a meal because, again, he was starving. And he's looking around a bit, and then he stands up and he gets to wander. He begins to wander here, and he runs his finger along the console table or whatever that was, some sort of furniture. Was that a fireplace? I couldn't even tell.
Yeah, it was like the mantle of a fireplace. It's some sort of mantle for sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And there's a thick layer of dust there. But Bill bursts through the door here with like 2 full plates. And it's like, was this a jump scare for us, or was this a jump scare for Frank to like keep him on his toes? Whatever. But as he sets the dish down, and Frank is seated now, the look on Frank's face is one of absolute joy and elation. And Murray, like, you're just like I just like the
what
first
the hell? It's like vegetables.
Like, hot meal, served on. First of all, there's like a golden plate down, and then he sets the. It was literally like setting for Thanksgiving or a similar meal. It was so beautifully put together, and there's this side shot, and I love it so much because Frank wastes no time in scooching forward in his chair while grabbing his utensils. And even if he wasn't starving, I think that he would still react similarly to this.
Yeah.
Because, my God, just so beautiful. And Frank compliments the chef with a few choice words that I absolutely relate to in what the fuck? Like, he's just so blown away by how delicious the meal tastes. And there's this recognition here that happens between them. And while gamers knew what was already going on, or could at least surmise what was going on, I think everyone else can already begin to gather and understand the connection that these two men are already sharing.
Yeah.
And they settle in to eat here with Frank regularly and emphatically enjoying his meal, which I'm sure on the inside, Bill was just like, ah, just enjoying it so much. But Bill on the outside was just like, yeah, great. But they, you know, time passes and now Frank is full and Dodge is leaving. There's this just kind of like, I guess I should be going, but do you mind? And he just redirects to this piano and we find out that it's a 1948. They don't tell us the brand, but it's an antique piano from 1948. Presumably Bill's mother, as Frank shuffles past sheet music. And he's like, oh, this isn't you. This isn't you. And Bill's just like, oh, this is my mother's. Just quietly in the background. Until he lands on Linda Ronstadt's Long, Long Time. It's the sheet music, the best of Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
And but he opens up to Long, Long Time, and Frank absolutely butchers this song on the piano. And in the background, Bill is cringing, and it's absolute gold. But Bill politely shuts him down.
Yeah,
and
not this. No, stop.
Yeah, stop doing what you're doing, man. And but it's established here that neither of them are musician. But if you look at the physicality of Bill in this moment, he is very tense, and just his arms are flat at his sides and his shoulders are high, and as Frank endeavors for him to play well, you think I suck, let's see what you got, kind of thing. But this moment is just so beautiful as he slowly plays the chords to Long, Long Time and sings. And this is really the beginning of the hard hitting emotions of this episode. I cried at this moment as they are both kind of overcome with emotion to a degree before they even really let it loose. And at the conclusion, Frank questions Bill of who the girl is, and Bill just says there's no girl. And Frank knows, because of course Frank knew. And they share this first kiss. Frank leans down and kisses him first, and it's very passionate. And Bill stands to kind of meet him and really give of himself in this. And it's so beautiful, and it's just got this tinge of sadness to it, because we can, as much as we've guessed about Bill's history, we can also absolutely assume that he's been in the closet his whole life, which is just gut-wrenching to think.
Yeah.
And Bill finally shares his name here after Frank asks. And again, comedic moment number 3, Frank tells him to go shower, and we absolutely know where this is going.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to Frank sitting in bed, half dressed, or I mean, I'm gonna just say that man was naked.
Yeah,
and
he was ready to go.
He was ready to go. And Murray Bartlett, I know that you are a gay man in real life, so I will never disrespect you, but you're a very good looking man. So thank you for just being a part of the show.
Yes. He's a very good looking dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful for, you know what I mean, for me to say things like that, I think. Right?
I know. I just feel like it's look, hey,
clearly, you can appreciate beauty.
Yeah, clearly he takes care of himself.
Yes, he does.
He's in great shape. Yes, that's fine.
Which we'll talk about that real quick. I don't think that Frank should be in that great of shape, given that he wasn't living with Bill yet and having regular access to protein and very healthy food, and not running away from infected or Fedra or things like that. So I think in real life, in reality, he would have been a little bit leaner. But I am not sorry. I am not sorry. So,
right.
Moving on.
Fair enough.
Yes. But Frank is sitting in the bed and waiting for Bill. And just this whole moment, I actually, my jaw dropped. I was like, this is so beautiful and romantic this fast already for these people. And it's wonderful. I mean, it was at peak romance, and I don't think it really let up from off of the gas the entire relationship, and they hit every single note with absolute clarity for Bill and Frank.
Yeah.
And but to get back to the scene, we can tell that Bill is nervous, but Frank has this really great intuition about how to proceed into this part of their relationship, this brand new relationship, and he recognizes that Bill is not familiar with this territory. And they're just going to begin with the simple things, which this comment cuts the tension for Bill, probably almost entirely, but also for us, the audience.
Mhm.
Because I think all in our own way, we've been in similar situations with people, regardless of your sexual preference, of
Mhm.
just like that nervous energy or that inexperienced nervous energy. And it was just so beautifully executed.
Yeah.
And Frank's intuition again is just wonderful. And they go slowly here, and Frank is taking the lead, and he makes it clear that he's not a whore and he's not in it for Bill's sweet ass culinary skills.
Right.
And that if they proceed, he is going to stay for a few days. And I think that that's wonderful. I'm glad that he made that clear. And not that I ever got that impression from Frank, but again, you don't know. We don't know. But the lighting, the moment, the movements, this is also absolutely beautiful. But before we proceed, we're just going to talk about a few things. So,
Mhm.
the needle drops. The needle drops are key. And then, especially Linda, which we haven't gotten that drop just yet, but
Right.
we've been made aware of the song, and we will find out, the true importance of it at the end of this episode.
Mhm.
But I think what once began as a man with good taste in music changes to a man with good taste in music who comes up with a way to get messages across the radio waves to Tess and Joel using decade specific tones. And that just shows how deeply clever Bill was.
Well, wasn't that Frank? That was Frank's idea, though. The decade, remember? Because he's talking with Tess about that.
Oh, you're right. And it was kind of off in the background. So
Yeah.
I think I just lumped it all together. I apologize. Yes,
No,
that
no,
was
that's okay. I mean, it's both. I mean, I there is no good mashup of their name. You go with like Brank or
no. Or Frill.
Frill.
Yeah. No, I don't like those.
There's no cute mashup of these two names that are just they're just each a syllable, so it doesn't really.
Yeah.
But I think that I do believe they both have good taste in music. So
For
but
sure.
yeah, it is interesting to see what a role it plays in their life.
Yeah.
Really.
Their whole life, not just
Mhm.
their romantic relationship and that kind of grounding, like common ground thing happening, but also, just how they survive.
Yeah.
And then, it was just the needle drops with the music and everything that we've seen up to this point were very clever. So good on Frank and Bill for
Yeah.
doing that.
Mhm.
The Arby's comment. I like this, and I know that this might be the hopeless romantic in me, but I think that this is absolutely one of the moments where Bill kind of felt that like, "Oh, I could fall in love with you. I could
Hmm,
absolutely fall in love with you." Because there's
interesting.
just so much back and forth at the start between everyone on this show, but that moment in particular was acted and then reacted to so perfectly between Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman
Mhm.
that it made their relationship seamless. Like, just the connectivity that or the chemistry that we have with certain people. Like, we know right off the bat if this excuse me, if this person is good or bad for us. That is like on a molecular level that happens to us.
Sure.
And, some romantic relationships take a while. Sometimes they're instant. Some friendships take a while. Sometimes they're instant. But I think in this moment, I don't know, there was just an awareness and I think it was mostly due to Frank's intuition and Bill's loneliness that it happened as fast as it did.
Yeah. I can get down with that. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that whatever part you want to point to during that opening meeting of the two
Mhm.
of them, it certainly started there. You
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
there are a couple points you could like that's when or that's when and it just
Yeah,
I feel like that's the mark of a really great um of great writing, but also great acting. You're like,
for
oh, there's
sure.
something here.
Mhm.
It's not on the page, but there's something here. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also like it comes down to the element of like disarming Bill.
Hmm.
And for a man who literally lives his whole life armed, for this random stranger to just instantly be like, Arby's didn't fucking give away food.
I
Like,
remember Arby's, man.
yeah, like, I'm old enough, my guy,
Yeah.
So it's like he instantly disarmed Bill, and I think that threw Bill off a little bit, but not in a bad way.
Mhm.
So,
I like it.
but going from there, I think the second time Bill falls a little bit in love with Frank was when he smiles that big, gigantic, beautiful smile at him.
Okay.
And the third time is the music. And the recognition that something more was already going on.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the symmetry, specifically with the cinematography and just how absolutely stunning it was from start to finish.
Mhm.
So the director of photography for this episode is someone named Eben Bolter. And
Yeah.
he did a phenomenal job on this episode. And weirdly enough, Andrew put this whole thing together using the music from the movie Up.
We got upped.
Yeah, we got upped with Bill and Frank. So basically, Andrew took a bunch of the clips, put them together to the music, and posted them onto our Twitter, onto our private Twitter or our personal Twitters, but was also shared on Tlu Podcast if you want to go check that out. But Eben liked that tweet where I was like, "Oh my god, it's up!"
Yeah.
And I just absolutely love that because what I get from what he's been tweeting, because he's been doing some behind the scenes,
Mhm.
run throughs and like blocking sequences and things like that, and using visual guides and comparisons. And he really takes pride in literally every frame
Of
that
course.
happened in this episode.
Mhm.
And again, with just the emphasis on every single thing and the consistency, it shines through. So just want to
Yeah.
give a little shout out.
That's all right. Yeah, and my thing, not to diminish the really excellent work that has gone on here,
Uh-huh.
and Up certainly not being the example of like a thing that very quickly breaks our hearts, but like it's
Yeah.
just a nice shorthand. You're like, okay, of course, right?
Mhm.
It's different enough.
Yeah.
But it's also similar enough that
Sure.
the comparison can be made. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
And it was
Little
beautiful.
fun, having a little fun.
Yeah. Bring a little light to it. So Bill allowing himself to have this moment
Mhm.
and to feel and experience this with Frank brought me to tears.
Yeah.
The first of many tears.
First of many
The
tears.
second of many tears. So I was crying at the piano. But knowing the nuances of this character, and a lot of them we just talked about earlier,
Mhm.
just kind of breaking down his character and how closed off he was, to allow himself to be swept up and so vulnerable could not have been easy for him. But
Yeah.
oh, did Nick Offerman pull that off flawlessly. And
Yes.
he is so humble about this because people are praising him and he's like, I still don't know why I got this job. Like, that's how he responds to that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm almost like speechless because we know him best from Parks and Rec.
Mhm.
I've watched a few of like that craft show he did with Amy Poehler,
Yeah.
which is kind of a reality based thing, and he wasn't really on it a lot, start and finish of the episode, but
Sure.
he is a very warm personality and funny and humbling, but like take the flowers, Nick. Take the awards because it was it was just perfect. That's all.
Yeah. Look,
Yeah.
the the old saying is true. Tragedy is what is it? Comedy plus time, right?
Yeah.
And that is why a comedian or somebody you believe to be a comedic in their persona
Mhm.
could make you cry. And it is, I think, I have a long running theory that also that swings the other way, where like a comedian can make me cry, but a dramatic actor cannot always make me laugh.
No.
Like, wouldn't go see a comedy starring Christian Bale,
I knew you were
right?
gonna use Christian.
I
I
love
knew you were
Christian
gonna use
Bale.
Christian.
We share a
Same.
birthday,
Yes.
so
Happy
we're
birthday,
connected in a
Christian.
very special way.
And Phil Collins.
And
Happy
Phil
birthday, Phil.
Collins, right? And Olivia Colman. There's a
Lots of
number of
greats.
the One of the greats. Yeah, and so I don't have like a great example to the contrary of that, but I do just feel like comedians can slot into roles that are dramatic and have a real impact.
Yeah.
We've seen it enough times now where it has to be true. I think of just that right off the top of my head.
I know where you're going.
What am I doing?
You're gonna say Bob Odenkirk.
I wasn't actually going to say Bob Odenkirk, but that's a great one. I was actually going to go with Bill Hader on Barry,
okay.
another HBO show. Barry is pitched as a comedy. It is not a comedy at all. It's like a very dark and sad show. Very much about the human condition. And Bill Hader, when I think of Bill Hader, now I think of him as Barry, but like Stefan from SNL. You're like, Stefan from SNL is going to make me cry? It's like, yeah, he's going to be real good at it too. It's like, okay. So that's kind of the long and short thing. It does not surprise me that Nick Offerman has these chops, but it is very nice that I mean, it's always nice when someone's very humble about their abilities, but he clearly has the abilities. He could back it up. Yeah.
Yes, they both deserve Emmys.
I mean, I hope they get the noms. They get all the noms. As we call them. We don't call them that.
No.
Well. I'm gonna talk a little bit more here. Flashback. We're in 2010. Is it 3 years later, right?
2017. Yeah, 2007 to 2010.
It opens on a little disagreement between Bill and Frank about upkeep of the neighborhood, which is very funny at just the highest possible level, like mowing the lawns and painting the house. And Bill doesn't understand. He's like, why should we do this? It doesn't mean anything. And that's when we get the really great line from Frank about, that's how we show love. Attention to detail is how we show love. And it means a lot, especially for a thing that happens later in the episode. We get a little bit about, we learn a little bit more about Bill and that how he was a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, right? I believe this is in reference to like the government, right?
Sure.
And how there are Nazis. He's like, you think everyone's a Nazi, Bill? And it's like, they were Nazi, like
they are now.
I was right, back then, whatever. Really, all Frank wants is some paint and gasoline for the lawnmower, which seems like, not at the time that they're in, not necessarily easy things, but given Bill's ability, potentially not as difficult as one might think, right? He wants to fix up a few of the shops, and Frank is adamant that they will have friends over, right? This was very funny. Bill sets him straight about this, like, there are no friends. We will not have any friends. And Frank reveals that he's been talking to a very nice woman on the radio. And Bill, he's like, what? And we cut to one of the legitimately funniest things, like right after that. What? We cut to like a very nice lunch party in the front yard, and it's Joel and Tess.
Yeah.
Shout out to both of them, Joel and Tess. They look incredible.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, they look really, really. They're very good-looking people. But
Anna Torv, you got
Anna
us.
Torv, they're looking real good. The Tess we met had her face all beaten and stuff, but like, oh, right.
Yeah.
And given the timeline, that means that they were together even back then, right? It's been a long time with Joel and Tess.
16 years.
So Bill has his gun on the table and it's pointed right at Joel. He's not holding, I mean, he is kind of holding on to it, but like Bill's like, you could just tell he's like, I don't like this at all. I do not want this, right?
Yeah.
But Frank and Tess are really hitting it off. They're having a great conversation. It's great. I just love that Tess basically in the apocalypse had like a gay friend. I love this for her, right? The two of them eventually, Tess and Frank, get up and they're like, oh, let's go check something out in the house. Bill again, don't go in the house, right? It's a very, very funny episode in parts.
Yeah.
We have a staring contest basically between Joel and Bill at
Mhm.
this point. And Joel says, "Get that fucking gun out of my face." And he
Mhm.
he listens. It's like really, really nice.
Mhm.
Um, Joel then talks about some of the stuff that they have in the QZ that they can't get here, stuff like medicine, stuff like certain types of supplies, right?
Mhm.
He Bill's like, "I don't need any of that stuff. I have everything we need right here."
Yeah.
And you know, Joel takes a look at the fence that they came through, and he says, "I give that thing." I think he says something like, "I give that thing 2 years," right, or something.
I think it was less, it was like a year.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
it's like it's like clear that Joel also knows his stuff, and I think that's probably how him and Bill kind of become friends. Like Joel has a knowledge of things, right? He's like,
Mhm.
"I can get you stuff from the QZ that you'll be able to fortify this that'll last the rest of your life, like aluminum fence or something." He says, right?
Mhm.
It's like, oh, it's interesting. Frank gives clothing to Tess, and
Mhm.
they're talking about a future exchanges. It's like kind of like we got through this scene pretty quickly, but it was really, really lovely to see all these characters together. I mean, really.
It really was,
Um,
yeah.
Joel brings things down. Tess and Frank are up ahead. Joel and Bill are back a ways. He gets a little bit more ominous. He says, like, Fedra won't come this far where you are,
Mhm.
but Raiders will come
Yeah.
eventually.
Mhm.
And will you have what it takes to protect this place, right? He puts the challenge out there, and Bill says that it'll be just fine, and that's
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I love the normalcy of this
It
entire,
was so funny.
from the fight to the lunch gathering or brunch
Yeah,
gathering or whatever.
just life.
Yeah, just life. The world is literally gone all around them. And yet here the four of them are sitting having a couple's brunch, drinking wine in crystal glasses and eating healthy homegrown food on
Yeah,
fine china.
right.
Like, it's so polarizing while being normalized at the exact same time
Yeah,
that my brain was like, I want to push back at this because this feels weird, but it doesn't, because that's the life that we know now.
right.
And it's Bill and Frank have found a way to maintain that together, and now they're sharing it with, well, Frank's friends. And Bill is just tolerating it at that point.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
And yeah, and to continue on with that, like Joel refusing to call Tess even his girlfriend or his partner at that point. Um, Instead he just calls her mine.
yeah.
Is yet
My mind, I
my
think.
mine. Yeah, he
Yeah,
like
it was.
pauses.
Yeah,
And it's just it's more a show of just how disconnected and like reticent he is to allow that love and light into his life that, on the flip side of things, Bill and Frank have done for themselves.
right.
So, and we'll kind of talk about the significance of that a little bit more later on in this episode, but yes, it was just a wonderful scene exchange between these four people. But even some of the dialogue, Joel tells Frank that they're pretty decent people just trying to get by in 2010 versus we're bad people, Joel.
Right. Well, time,
Yeah.
you know,
Like,
time will, yeah, do that.
yeah, I mean, I could ask you here, like, what do you think happened? And I did write that, but I don't think we need to go into that because we can just kind of assume and surmise all of the ways that they have had to survive. Given what we saw even in the little glimpses of Boston's QZ in episode 1.
Yeah,
It was not
it's
easy.
more of that, right?
Mhm,
They were out. First of all, they were outside of the QZ,
mhm,
right? So
mhm.
even back, just assume for 16 years, they have been sneaking out past the guards,
And
right?
back in.
And back in,
Mhm.
unbeknownst, right? Or maybe known somehow, but uh, right. So that's a slippery slope. You start, it is testing where, we'll break this rule. We'll break
Mhm.
this rule. How far
Yeah.
can we push this? What can we do? What more can we do? That sort of thing. So, yeah.
And it would have been interesting if, like, Frank, if there was one kind of offhanded comment to Bill, not to Tess or Joel, but Frank basically saying like, "Well, what do you think about them living here?" Like, but I don't think that Frank would have broached that because he knows even just having friends was enough for Bill. Like,
Right.
there was
It was
no fucking
exhausting.
like there's no fucking way he's gonna allow 2 more people to move. Because then again, it's the same thing that he feared from the beginning. If I feed you, then and you tell every bum about this, so I think that the balance that they had worked well enough that all parties were happy, including
Yeah.
Joel, because I don't know if he would have even been in for that. But anyway. But, yeah, like I said earlier, the more I see the years pass in a town that's run by only 2 people, the more I'm thinking that this would be the play, fully.
It's a
So,
lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of full days. It's a lot of full days.
it's fine, we would still have electricity, heating, hot showers, food, like, Andrew, we could do it. Make it 3 people because we have our kid, but we could do it.
Okay.
So,
I'm right. I guess I'll
start watching those videos now. I'll join you.
start
But
learning how to make electrified fences and dig in trap holes, I guess.
I can dig the trap holes. Well, not right now. My back is absolute garbage, but in the future.
Right. I mean, I'm 75. I should be retired. You know what I'm saying?
For decades now. But
Yeah.
so, all right, continuing. We're still in the flashback, but it is now 2013, so another year, 3 years have passed, and it has been 10 full years since the outbreak. And we see that the walls to Bill and Frank's town have been reinforced now with stacked cars, additional fencing, like metal fencing. I'm pretty sure that there was like razor wire in there at some,
Hmm.
to some degree. And then we see Bill and Frank getting their daily cardio on, or rather Frank's daily cardio with Bill joining him in because he's such a good sport. And Bill's struggling a little bit here. And Bill, I identify with that. but Frank says that he has something special for Bill here. And I love the quick little naughty joke that Frank tosses in, even though Bill didn't even hear it through his heart racing and his gasping for
Yeah.
air.
Right.
Like, it's such a testament to a relationship. But in my opinion, that we come up to the most beautiful moment of this show.
Yeah.
Like, full stop. And that's even including the ending, which was almost as beautiful, but much more heartbreaking. But it's
Hmm.
nearly dusk, and Frank walks Bill with his eyes covered to this garden patch. And he reveals, like, the bounty that's revealed has Bill just absolutely delighted because we see that there's strawberries, like
Yeah.
freshly grown, fully grown strawberries. And Frank tells Bill that he traded a gun with Joel and Tess for a packet of strawberry seeds. And but he assures Bill that it was a little gun.
It was just yeah.
It's a little gun.
I
Don't
love that
worry.
he had to say which gun.
Yeah, like he's so happy, but also which gun? Like,
We've seen that Bill has a
so many.
wall of guns.
So many. So many. But Frank picks a strawberry for Bill and then one for himself, and they enjoy this in silence before Nick Offerman's perfect giggle
Yep.
breaks the silence. And I'm like, what a fucking moment, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And they link arms and hands here, and Bill apologizes for getting older faster than Frank. But Frank states that older means that they're still here, and I think that that is a wonderful sentiment all of us would do well to remember, regardless of an apocalyptic situation or not.
Yep.
And then we have... It's going to be hard for me. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's it's real.
It's real. Because Bill just says, I was never afraid before you showed up, which is a absolute translation to I love you and I'm so fucking afraid to lose you.
Mm-hmm.
And they again, these hard-hitting moments, but then with tension cutters immediately afterwards, because they share this intimate kiss with the low setting sun behind them. And as Bill leans forward, kind of, pushing them back to just get it on, Frank stops the motion because absolutely we are not having sex on the precious strawberries, William. Like,
you know how much I paid for these strawberries? I had to give a gun for these.
Yeah, like, we cannot do this. Let's go inside, kind
It
of
was very
thing.
funny. Yeah.
It was so true to a real relationship, and that's the emphasis here.
Mhm.
We see so many relationships on TV and movies and so on and so forth where they're just fucking fake, and, like, people are just, like, doing it on, like, food that is just so precious in end times, or, they push all their shit on the floor and break everything in an office, and it's like, "Bitch, I still gotta work tomorrow." Like, no, that's not how
Yeah.
this goes, and I was so happy that that happened, because it's such a like, the reality of this show is such a
Mhm.
fresh breath of air, truly, in all
Yeah.
facets, whether it's about strawberries or sex or fucking what was the thing that we said earlier on that was just so relatable? I can't even remember now because there's so many of them. But
Arby's.
Arby's, yeah, like all of it. It was just, yeah, it's so refreshing. But proceeding from there, it's now a stormy night, and we don't know if it's that night or a couple, months or even years in the future, but we see people moving through the woods, and a tripwire is tripped,
Mhm, mhm.
and it alarms go off in the house, and then all this fucking chaos happens, and these big ass fire traps go off all around the chainsaw ones that you mentioned.
Yeah.
um and Frank awakes to the chaos, and he immediately starts searching for Bill, who is not next to him in bed. And just real quick, this was very reminiscent of Sarah waking up to the beginning of the end, essentially.
Yeah.
That same level of tension, but in a much different way with very different people,
Mhm, mhm.
executed again flawlessly. But Frank grabs a small pistol from the writing desk and then heads outside into the rain and all the fire and the chaos. And Bill is in partial tactical gear already, just sniping the shit out of the intruders on the opposite end of the fence with great success, I might add.
Yeah.
And Frank calls for Bill here, but Bill yells at Frank to get back inside. But in doing so, he takes a shot to his gut. And it takes a bit, but Frank eventually manages to get Bill inside, with the raiders dying on the other side of the fence still, thankfully, their
Mhm.
cries loud and lasting. And Frank tends to Bill here and, washes his hands with alcohol, washes the wound. But Bill begins to give Frank instructions, notes for everything, keys and copies for everything. But Frank, I don't think he's fully absorbing what's going on or what Bill is saying. He's just dead set on helping Bill survive.
Yeah.
And, excuse me. And it's at this moment that Bill just tells Frank over and over to call Joel. Just call Joel. He will take care of you. He just wants Frank to be taken care of because that is all that matters. And he starts to kind of drift from the pain, and, he's not feeling too much anymore. His eyes are kind of glassing over as Frank proceeds to clean the bullet hole.
Mhm.
So the night ends from there. But before we move on to the next section, the strawberry scene. I know we've talked a lot about this already, but this was one of the most incredible moments I've ever seen in anything ever.
Yeah.
And
Toasting it. They toast them.
yeah,
They clink their strawberries
they
together, you know?
do. Like, just a cheers to us. Like, we're
Yeah.
still here, we're still together, we're still surprising one another, which is important in relationships to keep it alive and well. And, it's not a matter of convenience for either one of them. They both want to be there, and they both want to be there together.
Mhm.
And it shows all of that, and I love it. And it's very hard for me to talk about that scene.
No, that's good. That's good. You summed it up nice.
Thank you. So the quick action scene uh just shows the dangers that Joel forewarned come to fruition.
Mhm.
And it left us on this precipice wondering if Bill was going to die that night, or was he going to make it to morning, and so on and so forth, because we know what happens to Bill in the game, and I'm not going to say what happens to Bill in the game. But I got to be honest, just with how much they've changed, particularly in this episode, I wasn't sure that Bill was going to survive.
Yeah.
And that was very tense, and I think it was a really intelligent move on the writer's part to keep everyone engaged, not just the new fans, but the gamers as well.
It was something that Neil had said at the end of the episode too, where they were the way that Craig and him approached it was essentially like if it's if it's if it's the same as or
Mhm.
or worse than, it was kind of weirdly worded, but like where they decide to go from the story, if they are going to deviate or not, determines
Mhm.
on if it meaningfully makes the story better,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And this is a case of every single choice that was made in this episode meaningfully makes the story better.
Yeah.
You talked about it on episode, I think probably the last episode, or maybe episode 1, I don't know, where you were like, Anna Torv is my Tess.
Yeah.
Eclipsing the one that you had known for years in the game. And I think the same is true here with Bill. Like, Bill is a character that I've known since the game originally released, and who I had a little bit of a fondness for, because he's a very prickly character even in the games, right?
Yeah.
But this is like my Frank. Like this is my Bill, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this is I sympathize with this character. I understand this character deeply.
Yeah.
And I want I want him to be happy, right? That is a very difficult tightrope to walk as a writer. Like, how do you get, it's like Sarah in episode 1. How do you get me to care? How do you get me to fall in love with a person in 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not
and they
easy.
did it again. They did it again. They actually have done it like 4 times. They did it with Sarah. They did it with Tess. They did it with Frank, and they did it with Bill.
Yep.
We're only 3 episodes in, and we've got 4 characters that we absolutely love. Right.
And fucking 3 of them are dead.
Right. And it goes without saying that Joel and Ellie, the reason that I believe, I'm not saying that I love Joel and Ellie yet, and it's because I don't think we are meant to love them yet.
I agree.
Right. I think that, but we get, and put them beside the characters that we're talking about, right? You're like, absolutely love Bill and Frank. Yeah. Absolutely love Tess. And again, gone, right? But they were written in such a way where like they had a complete arc right before our eyes, and we haven't seen the complete Joel and Ellie arc yet, so we're not quite there with them yet.
Exactly.
Right? But it's great to surround them with these types of characters, even in a tertiary way. It's just like it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
It really is. It really is. And one more quick note. So Bill not wanting Frank to be alone, and this shows how Frank was Bill's purpose in every sense of the before even Bill told him that. Yeah. He was prepared for so many things, and one of those things was a world where Frank would have to exist without him. And that is a level of love and devotion that was absent in the game between Bill and Frank. And I don't want to go too much into that. Yeah. But having it in this game, or in this show rather, elevated that storyline and the appreciation that I already had for Bill tenfold. Truly tenfold. And now I know when I go and I play the game and I get to that particular section, it's called Billstown.
It is called Billstown, yeah.
It's literally called Billstown. I will basically be playing this with this story in my head. Yeah. And a part of me will probably change the ending because I prefer this for Bill and Frank.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all.
Absolutely. We're going to move ahead again.
Yep. Big jump.
By a lot. After we see Bill on the table, not super sure what his fate is, we cut to 10 years later. It's a wide shot, right? 20 years for perspective in the grand scheme of things, 20 years post outbreak day overall. We have a wide angle of shot of their home. Frank is in a wheelchair on the porch. Bill brings him inside. We could see things are not really going well for Frank. Yeah. There are paint supplies and color, and life is in abundance all around. The paint is a nice callback to painting the house earlier when they were younger, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Frank has painted Bill many times. You see them all, you see these portraits all over the house, right? This is a really, really lovely moment. Bill is out of focus in the distance, and Frank is painting. And he approaches Frank. He's got a watering can. He's like watering the flowers and stuff like that. To show attention is to show love. Themes emerge, patterns emerge. Bill gives him a wink.
Mm.
It's like very lovely. Got me all choked up.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
crying now.
Yeah. It's just like no words are exchanged. It is a wink, and then it cuts to Frank, and he gives a smile and continues to go paint and all this stuff. We see their life after being together for 16 years. It's calm. It is normal. It's not easy. It has not been easy, but they are literally doing it, right? To get old in this world is like a privilege, I think, right?
For sure.
It's something you need to work for. Frank, we cut to the kitchen. Frank is struggling to eat. He has a lot of pills he has to take. He cannot walk anymore. Bill brings them to their bed in the next scene. He gives them a kiss goodnight. The next morning, Frank is watching Bill as he sleeps, and he's already in his wheelchair. We saw that Bill physically had to lift him out of his chair and place him in bed. When the next we see Frank, he has gotten into his chair on his own, right? He makes a little bit of a joke about it. It's like took half the night or took all night or something like that.
Yeah.
And Bill is not amused at this at all, right?
No.
Bill doesn't want Frank to fall asleep in the chair. Frank promises to stay up and he tells him flat out, he's like, today is my last day. Bill is taken aback by this. We see him trying to process what he just heard. He makes a tearful plea to Frank not to go through with this, but he's like made up his mind about it, right? Our best guess is that maybe it's ALS that Frank has. They don't ever outright say what it is, but they do mention that there wasn't even a cure for this back in the world, right? Is something along those lines. Like even when things were normal, there wasn't a cure for this. They're both in tears. Bill moves. They're positioned in the living room. Bill moves closer to Frank on the couch. Frank just asks for one more good day because those good days with Bill have far outweighed the bad days. he wants toast. That's like a very easy ask to start the day, right?
Yeah.
I was like, we'll start with toast, then we'll go to the boutique. Bill will wear what Frank wants him to wear, and then they will get married. Bill will cook dinner and then crush up an enormous amount of pills in his wine, and then they will fall asleep in each other's arms. Frank's like, I will fall asleep in your arms, and that'll be that. Bill cries. He says that he can't. And then Frank says, yeah, if you love me, you will do this for me. Love me the way I want you to, is the actual word that the phrase that he uses.
Yeah.
We get shots of the house continue to be adorned with Frank's paintings, his sketches. There's plants, there's life. This is still a very rich and full home that they're in, right? Song begins to play here is On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter from Arrival. We see torn American flags on the houses flapping in the wind, leaves outside changing. There's a truly great shot of Frank and Bill going to the clothing boutique. It's a really wide shot, but it's like really masterfully executed. Frank is marveling at all the flowers in bloom. He's shaking his hair in the wind as Bill is like just barely keeping it all together. Like he's not taking this well. Back at their house, we see the paint has been left out to dry. Flower beds have begun to die. And then the hole that trapped Frank all those years ago was never actually covered up again. Bill and Frank marry by the 1948 antique piano with a still life of flowers behind them, which is a really nice touch. They kiss and hold on to each other for a bit as the sun gets lower outside of the windows. And then after that, Frank waits at the table again for dinner, which is a really lovely callback to the beginning of the show. It's, again, you're talking about the symmetry. There's so much of it in this episode, framed up identically, this wide shot of the table. The one thing that's also worth noting is Frank he's admiring that all of the dining room is clean. There is not, you've run your finger across it, you will find no dust, right? It's a well-kept home.
Yeah.
Bill brings in the very first meal he ever made for Frank, the exact same wine. I think it was rabbit, maybe. This time, instead of sitting on the opposite side of the table, he sits right next to him, though, which is a really lovely touch. And they have their final meal together. Frank doesn't look around this time as he waits for Bill to bring the wine. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, they finish. They finish their regular wine.
Yeah.
Bill goes to the kitchen and he gets what I guess is dessert wine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This has much larger glasses. Bill pours, fills both. Frank is watching him intently. Bill takes Frank's glass and he has a massive bag of what used to be pills, medication, and he pours it into Frank's wine, stirs it up, and then hands it to him. It's a gold spoon. The stirring is a very nice, thoughtful touch. This is their time. This is their choice. Frank looks at the glass and asks if it will be enough, meaning to kill me. Will this be enough? It will. Frank downs the entire glass. It's one and it's done. Right? Bill mirrors exactly what Frank does. He takes his entire glass of dessert wine and hits it back, and Frank knows. Essentially, Bill explains that in the bottle there were already enough pills to kill a horse. That what he gave Frank was just more of pomp and circumstance, right? Yeah. Bill is old and satisfied. He says, "Frank, you were my purpose," right? It's a lot there's a lot of emotions during this scene. Frank doesn't support this, and it's a very funny moment. He says he should be furious, but objectively it's incredibly romantic. They laugh, there are tears. Frank tells Bill to take them to bed. They share a really lovely hug, an embrace, and Bill takes them to their bedroom, and Gustavo's Vanishing Grave, parentheses childhood.
Grace, I'm sorry.
Vanishing Grace, parentheses childhood, song from The Last of Us Part 1, plays in the background. It's a lot. If you weren't in tears, I don't know what to tell you. It was a very emotionally charged scene.
Yes. And let's go back to the beginning of it. So, we can see that Frank is clearly sick and has aged significantly since we last saw him a decade earlier. And I mean, I'm sure all of us had that moment, where we were confused because it was a wide shot of one of the men sitting in a wheelchair. Yeah. But at first I was like, oh, Bill survived, but maybe he just couldn't walk.
Yeah, paralyzed, something like that.
Yeah, but no, unfortunately, Frank developed some sort of degenerative disease in his later years, and we see the product of that. And that was heartbreaking, but he accepted it, and I think that that's the most important thing when it comes to uncontrollable circumstances that occur to us, regardless if we're in a pandemic or an apocalypse or not.
Yeah.
There are just some things that the only thing you can do is accept and move forward for however long you can. But to bring it up a little bit, I think the wink, I know the strawberry scene I mentioned being the best part of the episode, but the wink was my favorite moment in this entire episode in particular. It's so subtle a move that you share with your person, like the love of your life. And when you look at the grand picture, when age takes everything from you, from your looks to your physical prowess and the things that you used to love that you no longer can do, whether that was with your partner or separately, still having that foundation is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And it just speaks so loud to not only their romantic love, but their fondness for one another as separate people beyond their relationship. And this
Yeah.
was all done in a wink. And again, it goes to that reality of this is what real relationships are like. This is how it is to love someone year after year and go through life with them and all of the ups and all of the downs. And we all know, like, none of us are getting out of this fucking thing alive, but we all take that chance to say yes or no.
Mhm.
And they took that and they said, fuck yeah. But here we are.
Yeah.
So you might have to take over the other notes, Andy.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We wanted to note the song choice. It's a really, even if you weren't previously familiar with this song, it evokes a very specific emotion from you, especially when paired with what we are witnessing, how the story is unfolding right before us. It's just really expertly delivered. It's Gustavo at his best, right? That this is what he does. It is a mood, it is a vibe, it is a it's transportative. It brings you into the story, truly.
I agree. However, my note was referencing the song by Max Richter
Oh.
when Bill makes his choice, or when Frank makes his choice. Just that, yeah, from the
Yeah.
movie. Arrival is an incredible movie. If you guys at home listening have not seen it, please do
Yeah.
yourself the favor.
That's it.
A
That's
very
it.
human story, much like this one was.
A very human story despite aliens.
Yeah.
Uh mild spoilers, I guess.
All right,
Not
I can
really.
do the last one. I'm sorry I'm
All
a
right.
mess, guys. If you're watching, I apologize. If you're listening, I'm great.
Yeah, things are going super well.
Yeah, I'm so happy. Uh Last final note, and I know that I don't have full, like, I'm not the person to say this because I am not queer. Um I mean, I do consider myself, I don't have to reveal anything about myself. But all that is to say, this was a perfect love story. It was a
Great.
perfect queer love story. There was no tragic ending. It was a beautiful ending that they chose. Was it sad? Absolutely. Was it tragic? No. There
Mhm.
was no baiting, no teasing, no leading on. There wasn't, we're promising this, but we're giving that, and fuck anyone if they're upset with us. It was two people who found normal love in abnormal times. And I cannot stress this enough, that this is how you write LGBTQ love stories. Death was not used in their love story as a plot device to sever what could have been or might have been, or to yank them apart despite, or in spite of all of the circumstances. We have
Mhm.
seen that done time and time and time again, and it is fucking wrong, and it is tired, and it is offensive, and it just has no place anymore. If you do not know how to write an accurate LGBTQ story, do not do it. Period.
Yeah.
But this was directed by Peter Hoare, who is a gay man. It was
Mhm.
written, the credits are Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin. I don't know who had the lion's share of writing in this, but um just based off of what people have said about the third episode of the podcast that I will listen to tomorrow, Craig Mazin was the predominant, like, replier to Troy Baker's questions.
Mhm.
So I'm leaning more towards Craig was the like primary or the lead in this episode. Either way, this is it. This is it. If you need an example for how to proceed with a story that takes on any world building, any situations that you can put characters in that will have a love story, a gay love story, a lesbian love story, a just any of it. This is it. Full stop.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I will say this: it's probably the healthiest, happiest relationship that this world that they have created,
Of The Last of
uh,
Us.
that you could ever hope for, right?
Fully. Mhm.
Um, And that says everything. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, just two people trying to make it in this wackadoo world. So,
Yeah.
and I yeah, you know, they love each other, and it's just an interesting, we are invited to, and if, depending on how you receive this episode, you are invited to love them, and you may
Mhm.
fall in love with them and their life together.
Yeah.
I know I did. I
Same.
was, I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. So yeah.
Yes. Look at my face. I'm a fucking mess. Of course I love them. Sorry, but
YouTube.com/@wayfaring
wow.
or TLU podcast.
Wow, Andy. Oh my goodness. All right, let's I
Bring
believe
it
that
home.
this is the last. Yes, let's bring it home. So we are now in current present day in Bill and Frank's town. And we see the overgrown Lincoln sign telling us where we are as Joel and Ellie approach the electrified gate. And Joel unlocks it using the code and they enter. And he immediately starts noting all of the dead plants outside of the front of Bill and Frank's house. And
Mhm.
he knows that something, you can tell that Joel knows something isn't right because Frank would never allow for that. Or Bill, given that he obviously picked up that work because
Yeah.
Frank could no longer do it.
Mhm.
So as we enter the house, we see old photos on the mantle with burned down candles that are just, unusable at this point. And as they enter, Ellie just kind of looks around and she's, what the fuck? As Joel begins to call for Bill and Frank. Joel tells Ellie to stay put. And as we, the camera, begin to look around the room, we see dust, a fine layer of dust, not a thick layer of dust, but a fine layer of dust is covering everything, including the rotted remains of Bill and Frank's last meal together on the table, plus the empty packet that held the drugs, of course. And Ellie walks over to the piano, taps a few keys on it, and then notices the note and what will turn out to be a truck key. So at this moment, Joel knocks on the bedroom door and pushes in slightly, but the air exchange forces the front door to shut. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Ellie uh, opens the note and reads it and tells Joel that it was from Bill. But she says it was titled "To Whomever," but probably Joel.
Yeah.
I fall under the whomever category, so I read it.
Yeah.
Again, a wonderful Ellie moment. But Ellie confirms what Joel already knew and tells Ellie to read the note to him in so many words. And she does and says, it's August 29th, 2023. If you find this, please do not come into the bedroom. We left the window open so the house wouldn't smell. It will probably be a sight. I'm guessing you found this, Joel, because anyone else would have been electrocuted or blown up by one of my traps.
So good.
So good. Take anything you need. The bunker code is the same as the gate code, but in reverse. Anyway, I never liked you, but still, it's like we were friends, almost, and I respect you. So I'm going to tell you something because you're probably the only person who will understand. I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died, but I was wrong because there was one person worth saving, and that's what I did. I saved him. Then I protected him. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. I leave you all of my weapons and equipment. Use them to keep Tess safe. But there's an ellipsis here because Ellie doesn't finish that sentence. Joel grabs it, and we can see the words on the paper, but we can't see
Mhm.
much more beyond that.
Yeah.
And Joel tells Ellie to stay there as he goes outside, and you can see that he's just fighting off a severe bout of grief over the loss of Tess and the uncertainty of his immediate future. And he crumbles the note and tosses it away. He looks at the key in his hand and immediately switches gear from grief to mission or
Mhm.
quest, whatever. And he opens up the garage and we see the blue white truck, which is revealed once he pulls the tarp off of it. And he pops the hood and there's no battery inside. And for a moment, Joel shakes in frustration because now we are 3 for 3 with a fucking battery issue.
Damn it.
But he knows Bill, and going to the fridge, he sees all of the parts to put a battery together and charge it up. But now we're back inside the house, and we see Ellie has literally not moved from where she was sitting. And Joel tells her to show him her arm. And she does. And we see that the second bite now is almost entirely healed. And this plan forms because Joel's brother is in Wyoming, the battery is charging, and Joel guesses that at, basically worst case scenario, Tommy will know what to do with you and the Fireflies and where the lab is. Ellie listens, just kind of agrees, and then brings up Tess. And Joel shuts her down and says there's some rules you need to follow. You don't bring Tess up ever. We just keep our histories to ourselves. Don't tell anyone about your condition. They'll just shoot you, and do what he says when he says it. And he asks her to repeat this, and she just, what you say goes. And Joel is resigned. He's not necessarily happy, but he is resigned because what now? What else could he do at this point? And they grab what they can from the house. They go down into the basement's bunker, and this is where Joel turns off the music. It was 80s music playing because, again, remember that spells trouble. But Joel expands that to say if he didn't reset it every couple weeks, then 80s would play, signaling something was wrong.
Yeah.
And tells Ellie to grab the cans, not the swollen ones or the dented ones. Cans of food, of course. We all know to look out for the dented, swollen cans of food, even not in this kind of world. Don't do it. But she tries here for a gun again, but he shoots her down, pun intended. And then the next scene, we see her grabbing some toilet paper, and they grab some new clothes. And it is the palm tree shirt, the iconic palm tree shirt for those of us who have played the game throughout the past 10 years. Yeah. And they go through the rest of the house here, and Ellie finds that there's hot water and she will be taking a shower, and tells Joel that he stank and needs to do the same. And, fast forward a little bit. Ellie is showered and dressed now in the palm tree shirt. We hear Joel off in the distance. There's a grandfather clock behind the table, the dining room table. She messes with that a little bit, but ends up breaking the hands and just shuts the door. And she proceeds to go through the writing desk and finds Frank's small pistol. And we're going to talk about Chekhov's gun here in a little bit.
Sure.
But she takes it and quickly stows it in her backpack as we hear Joel approaching. And Ellie sasses him now that he's clean and, quote, pretty. And he just, tells her to shut up because that's Joel. And tosses her some deodorant to, just keep the cleanliness going.
As long as we can. Just hold on to this feeling.
Truly. From there, they pack the truck with their new belongings, and they're fresh and clean, and Ellie is just amazed by sitting in the cab. And it's her first time in a car, we learn, to which she says it's like a spaceship. But no, Joel says it's like a piece of shit Chevy S10 truck. And that made me laugh.
Yeah.
But Joel realizes Ellie doesn't know what a seatbelt is or how to use one, so he helps her, and Ellie is delighted by this, of course. And from there, they pull out of the garage, and she finds a cassette tape in the glove compartment, and we put it on, and it is, of course, the last needle drop, which is Linda Ronstadt's Long, Long Time. Linda finally makes an appearance here. So it's hard for me to talk. I'm sorry, but it was beautiful. And it puts a capstone on the entire love story of Bill and Frank. And now we have the story of Joel and Ellie and the importance of their music and their overall journey starting fully. And Joel actually smiles in reaction to Ellie's, it's better than nothing. And she sees him react this way and smiles, just a little smile all on her own. And they drive off into the sunset out of town as the camera pulls inwards to an open window. And the curtains billow. Can you do it?
Yeah, the curtains are billowing in the wind. We see the truck pulling away in the distance. We don't have to see to know where we are. Yeah. The room we're looking out from. But there's a stunning portrait of Bill hung above some dead flowers, and that is where the episode ends. Episode 3, Long, Long Time.
Oh, Last of Us. What the hell?
It was great.
It was great. This is by far and away the best episode of this season for me.
I know we're going to talk a little bit here, but
sure.
There are some people that are none too pleased with this episode.
We're not going to talk about them, though.
No, yeah, I just want to say that it's not even really worth listening to that noise because they are coming at it from like just a very It's a nonsensical angle that they have. I feel like objectively, this is an episode that not only fits within this world, but also stands alone, right?
Yeah.
If they were just going to make this story, if
Mhm.
you chop off the beginning, Joel and Ellie, and the end, Joel and Ellie, and you just told the story of these two people,
Yeah.
that'd be fantastic. It's a fantastic story.
Yeah. Well,
Full stop.
yes, and aside from the bigot sandwiches out there that are
Yeah,
hating on it because, oh my god, a gay couple, how dare they put fuck off. But, um, I understand criticisms from people who are like, "I really loved Billstown in the game. I truly loved what happened in that section of the story and the adventures that happened, the problems that unfolded, the solutions that came up, the
sure.
sass between Ellie and Bill in particular."
Mhm.
However, my only counter to that is that would not have fit in this world whatsoever. What
Yeah.
what episode 1 and 2 established in this iteration was that Joel is not happy to be with this kid and is looking for any and all ways to get rid of her.
Mhm.
Joel was not that incessant in the game. And without going too deeply into it, Bill's alive in the game, okay? And Joel and Ellie get a truck and they leave. But Bill is alive in the game. But that would not work in this world because
Yeah.
Joel would just be like, "Oh, she's your problem now. Bye." And he would leave. That's exactly what would happen if Bill or Frank survived in this story, in this adaptation. So that right there doesn't fit. Beyond that, the amount of sass that Ellie gave Joel, particularly in part or in episode 2, equals what Ellie and Bill did to each other in the game. So we are not missing that element either.
Yeah.
So I understand the pushback from people who genuinely wanted to see that, and I'm not judging you and calling you a bigot sandwich. Because not everyone that has criticisms is a homophobe or, anti-romance or whatever. I'm not saying that whatsoever. When we say fuck off, those are the haters, and you know exactly who we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm not. Clearly, that's not who I'm referring to either.
Mhm.
And I agree that that section of the game is fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we see a different Bill.
Yes.
But again, we have to meet the show where it is. The fun of Billstown is the interaction that you have with it in the game,
Yes.
right? That when you remove the interaction of Billstown, it's a fairly linear and kind of predictable story.
It is.
So
It really is.
this was something that I never anticipated.
Mhm.
And that is, it's delightful. First of all,
Mhm.
it's wonderful to be surprised by this story that I thought I knew everything
Inside and
about.
out. Yep.
And then on top of it, to not only have them zig when, again, I feel like I'll be saying this almost every episode for the rest of the series, where it's like they zigged instead of zagged, right?
Yeah.
To have it done in such an expert way,
Mhm.
uh, it's, there are great episodes of television that stand alone in their scope
Mhm.
and
This is one.
impact, and
Mhm.
this is one of them. I think it will go down as it is essentially an instant classic,
I
like an
agree.
all-time great episode of television.
Yeah. I agree.
And that is that, right?
Mhm.
The book has already been closed on it. We're only 2 days out from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's all. That's
Yeah.
all I wanted to say. I don't participate with the bad actors. It's got like a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, like the individual episode, which
Mhm.
it doesn't, it's like, oh, it's not 100. It's like, it's so incredibly difficult to get a perfect score there.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's really, in my eyes, stack it up with
Mm.
pick the best show in your mind. You're like, oh, the best show is Breaking Bad. I was like, this is Ozymandias, right?
Mhm.
That's like, that is the level that I'm telling you this episode operates at.
I
It's
agree.
excellent.
I agree.
Yeah.
Um, and jumping ahead in some of the notes, like, to stick with game Bill versus, show Bill, I think,
Mhm.
some of the other complaints that people were talking about was just like Bill was a cautionary tale for Joel in the game of what could happen to him if he fully cut himself off from the world. And that
Sure.
is true. But Show Bill is an aspirational tale of how Joel should let that love and purpose in, whatever it is. Bill thinks that it's Tess because he doesn't know that Tess is gone, but
Yeah.
it's Ellie now. And Bill opens up Joel's mind. I'm not going to say his heart just yet, but I think, what Bill did in the game, Bill still achieved in the show.
Yeah.
So it's
I
successful.
Yeah, that rather than being, I think it's actually, I think the show did it even more, rather than display it as them being two sides of the same coin, or a path that Joel could end up like this person.
Yeah.
It started them at essentially the point where, like, they are the same,
Mhm.
right? It's assuming like they are the same.
Yeah.
And Bill took a path
Mhm.
that led him to an ultimately better place
Yes.
where he felt fulfilled,
Mhm.
and that there is still time for Joel to take a path
Yeah.
that will lead him to a place of Bill's level of happiness,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that's where I lost it when Ellie was reading the letter. That was the
Oh,
part that
yeah.
hit the hardest for me,
Mhm.
because I was like, that is what they are trying to convey to us right now. Like, we will start them when you go back to the dinner part, or the the lunch party on the front lawn, right?
Yeah.
Joel sitting across from Bill, it might as well have been the same person,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
They each had someone special in their lives, but they are closed off. They have clearly both experienced tragedy. They are survivors,
Yeah.
right? And then we don't see Joel and Tess again. We focus on Bill and all of these choices he's made that truly make him happy. And then he explains, that's what he said. He's like, it's almost like we were, I hate you, right? But it's
Yeah.
almost like we were friends.
Yeah. Almost.
And I think he sees himself in Joel and vice versa. And
Yeah.
he's like, I was wrong. And the subtext there is like, I think you were wrong too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is why that's why I think this is better, right? Like,
Yeah.
I it's something, it's very difficult to you go into a thing and you're like you, right? You love The Last of Us,
Mhm.
right? It's extremely difficult to unseat expectations that you've had for 10 years.
Sure.
And in 1 hour and 15 minutes, or whatever this episode was, for me, it was like, this is better. Like, and I will not, I mean, like, I would hear arguments that say, oh, the game or whatever. It's like, that's great. But to me, this is better.
Mm.
Like, it was
Mhm.
that fast,
Mhm.
because everything they did made so much more sense to me in
Yeah.
context.
And I think that that's one of the things that I struggled a lot with going into this show was like, "Oh god, what if I love certain things more?" Because I'm such a but, like, overall, the game will always be my favorite,
Sure.
and that version of Joel and Ellie in the games will always be my favorite, but I'm allowing myself to stow some of the expectation baggage by the door
Mhm.
and just absorb this and experience it in this way.
Yeah.
And last night really showed how beautiful a story can be if, if you just it really is. It's just, if you open your heart.
That's
Like,
it.
for the characters, for us as viewers, and and beyond. It was just extraordinary storytelling, extraordinary acting, cinematography, music, directing, lighting, everything came together so beautifully. And I think a little tiny tidbit, Billstown is known as like the sunset town because it's literally sunset the entire fucking time you're there. You could be
Yeah.
there for 12 hours. The sun ain't setting. But
It's beautiful.
if like minus the stormy night and some of the brighter days, for the most part, it was sunset in Bill and Frank's town with the strawberries, with when when they chose to pass away together, it was
Yeah.
sunset. So they kept a little bit of that sunset town from the game and brought it over, and that was just beautiful. So yeah,
Yeah. Of course.
but to talk about Chekhov's gun real quick, Andy, explain to the lovely listeners what Chekhov's gun is.
Anton Chekhov, famous playwright. You can't you take your 3-act structure of a traditional play. You can't introduce a gun in the first act without firing it by the third.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have Ellie grab a gun for that not to pay off at some point.
Frank grabbed the gun and Ellie grabs it later.
Oh, correct.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's, again, a mirroring, right? But essentially, like, we now know, Frank's story has ended. We now know that Ellie has a gun that Joel doesn't know about. And so that's just something to keep in your mind.
Yeah.
Again, that's not full transparency. That's not how that plays out in the game.
No,
so
it's not.
I have no idea how they will utilize this in future episodes. And my guess, again, just an educated guess based on this, is probably won't be the next episode because they want us to forget about it.
Yeah.
I think it's a long payoff, truly. And I would love for it to not come up for a while. But it is very interesting that Ellie has a gun. We don't know if she can even use a gun, right? So yeah, that's just a very Chekhov's gun. Now there is a gun in play that is obscured from us and from one of our characters.
Yeah. And now we get to forget about it and then just be like, oh shit, when it comes
at the appropriate moment. That gun will come in so handy.
Yeah.
But we just don't know when that's going to be.
Yes. And lastly, the song Long, Long Time, title of the episode, could not have chosen a better song. I didn't want to include lyric for lyric in our podcast notes. If anybody is listening to this, I'm assuming that you either know the song or you have since gone and listened to it and read all about it. But if you haven't, please go and treat yourself.
Yeah,
it is a great song.
All
right, now we're gonna get into some TV game spoilers, little spoilies. So check back with us in about, these are pretty short, so 3 to 4 minutes at most.
Yeah.
And all right, so Ellie's excitement over the arcade game. So Mortal Kombat 2 in the show is actually Angel Knives in the game. And it is Angel Knives in part 1, but also in Left Behind the DLC. And she has a wonderful moment with Riley. And that is all I can say about that because my co-host has not played the DLC yet.
Unbelievable. Who is this clown? Get him off the show. Mortal Kombat 2 is a great choice. I don't know if clearly they didn't want to like license another video game inside of a video game, even though that's kind of cool. Naughty Dog, of all developers, is one of the few that has done a game within a game. For no spoilers for what that is, but it is a different Naughty Dog game inside of a Naughty Dog game. Really, really chef's kiss.
Yes.
I'm guessing that Angel Knives was supposed to be like Mortal Kombat, even in the video game, but that's super cool. So just a fun fighting game. Lots of blood, lots of gore. It makes sense why a 14-year-old would love it.
Oh yeah, fully. Conversation by the mass grave. So sacrificing the few to save the many. It is close to that sequence in the game where Joel and Ellie are approaching the bookstore after taking out all of the bastards in under the bridges in Pittsburgh. Um, it is close to that. It's not quite identical,
Mhm.
but because Ellie didn't come back with that follow-up comment of "That's shitty," about Joel saying they sacrificed a few to save the many, which is what they did. And in
Yeah.
killing all of those people, including that mother and her child, they were trying to save the many that were in the QZ. But
Mhm.
it was close enough that I wanted to include it here. Ellie's commentary on flying, which also takes place towards the end of The Last of Us Part 1. Ellie talks about how she had a dream of flying and, just kind of inquisitive. Has Joel ever experienced that? So very similar again, but not identical. Um, the car moment. I know I just have to get to this one real quick because I can't, I don't want to forget it. But Ellie calling the car a spaceship is one of the most pivotal, beautiful moments in Joel and Ellie's uh journey and relationship, and it is something that takes place in The Last of Us Part 2. And Ellie has an obsession with space, and she's a very intelligent young girl and pours herself into reading books and having facts and spouting them and just kind of showing Joel up a bit. And then he, for her birthday, takes her to a museum where there is a replica pod, like spaceship pod cockpit area.
Mhm.
And it is without a doubt my favorite part in the entire Last of Us Part 2 game. And to have her say that so early in their journey is a beautiful thing, because he
Yeah.
will remember that. The evacuation sign in Bill's town is almost, or Bill and Frank's town is almost identical to the one in the games. There were several in Bill's town all along the streets. And yeah, pretty identical. And
The other quick thing that I noticed, we didn't see the finished version of it, but the spray painting on the doors, the circle with the X
yeah.
and then the numbers. So
Mhm.
it's like, I can't remember specifically how it translates, but like they draw a circle, they put an X in the middle of the circle, and then so you have your 4 quadrants. It's like maybe how many infected were in there, how
Yeah,
many regular people, how many they evacuated, and then there's like another number. I'm sure
mhm,
one of our listeners from the game can fill me in,
for
but it was
sure.
a very interesting way throughout the game. You saw all, like, basically every door had
Mhm.
this red circle X and a series of numbers on it.
Yeah.
So they did that in Billstown too. It's pretty cool.
Mhm. Although I thought in the games it was a just like an X, not a circle. And
Oh,
each
well, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, maybe there's no, but yeah, essentially you get the 4 quadrants,
yeah,
and and it always stood for the placement was always identical for what those things stood for. So,
yes. Yeah, good
very,
catch.
it's a great visual of spray painting in red on a front door, very, very biblical.
Yes. Oh, yes. So Joel crumbling the note from Bill and
Mhm.
throwing it aside is the reverse. So in the game, Frank kills himself by hanging himself because he had bites by an infected.
Yep.
And Bill and Joel and Ellie find him hanging in a house, and he is basically a skeleton, so he's been dead for a while. But Frank left behind a pretty nasty note for Bill,
Yeah.
basically saying, "I was tired of your bullshit. Fuck you. I'm out." And Bill takes that note and crumbles it up and throws it on the floor. And as the player, you have to take that note again
Mhm.
and stow it away because it counts towards your platinum trophy. But um, yeah, it was again a nice mirroring because it's an adaptation, it's not a recreation. So
Mhm.
just wanted to make note of that. And the last and final note, the orders that Joel gives Ellie after the "we don't bring Tess up" speech. And
Yeah.
that was probably the most identical moment to the game, which happens after a sewer sequence in The Last of Us Part 1, before you even get to Billstown. So in the
Yeah.
show, it happened after Billstown, but while they were still there. So interesting how they're tweaking things and moving things up or pushing them down a little bit in the storytelling. But yeah, I'm on board. And that's the end of the episode. If we missed something, please write in and let us know. Some quick contact information, and I'm just going to turn the rest of the show over to Andrew. But our Instagram is TLOU Podcast. So if you're into that, go follow us over there. Or Twitter at TLOU Podcast. Our YouTube, just go and search for TLOU Podcast, and you will have at least 14 or 15 videos. I'm not entirely sure, but we got some stuff over there for you. Do not forget our Wayfaring Strangers, The Last of Us review podcast. It's another unofficial podcast, of course, from yours truly, where we go literally subsection by subsection of each chapter in the games, breaking it down, giving it to you, and digging into all of it. We've been on like a 3-week hiatus, but we will be back at it later this week, just in case anyone's interested. So yeah, if you'd like to go check out our website with information about us, our shows, Wayfaring West, which is a travel series we're endeavoring to do, where we go to all the locations in the games and now the TV show, you can do that by going to tloupodcast.com. If you would like to follow me and Andrew on our personals, you can find me everywhere at Jaded Vader and Andrew everywhere at Dark Driving.
Done.
So yes, give that call to arms.
Hey everyone, my name's Andrew, one of your co-hosts for this show and a few others. It would seriously, Jim Wiz, was it? Jim Wiz?
I believe so.
Jim Wiz had just such a great idea earlier in the episode where that person, Jim, I assume, or Wiz, I don't know, whatever you like to be called, went and reviewed our show. Mm-hmm. It takes a moment of your time if you want. It's a free way to help us rise through the ranks, because there are a handful of other shows that are attempting to do what we do. If you just give us that 5 stars in your platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Play, whatever, and just that is great. If you want to go the extra mile and write something just like Jim Wiz did, even if it's just 2 words, that makes our day. Yes. And obviously you get shouted out on the episode. So go ahead and do that. It would mean a lot to us. And that is my impassioned plea for you to help us, right? Mm-hmm. If you get any sort of joy out of what we do, the reciprocal of that joy would be to just smash 5 stars.
Yes. So thank you. I echo that sentiment.
Boom.
Yeah.
I think it's your turn to read the outro. I think I did. Or is it my turn? I think it's your turn.
You've done them all. So I thought
I've done them all? No, I can't. That can't be right. Is that right?
You did 1 and 2. Now just keep going. I talk so much.
Oh my God. The outro. Oh my God. Here we go. Until we're tending the gardens of an unprecedented life. Next time, runners, we hope you stop and smell the fresh strawberries.
Thank you guys for being here, for supporting us. And yeah, we'll be back next week for episode 4.
A little peek behind the curtain before we go. Jack was like, hey, we're going to keep this episode short. Just take a peek at the time code in your podcast player. Let me know how that went.
I had a lot to talk about, okay?
Just let me know how that went. Leave that in your review.
Yeah. Yeah, we're long-winded. And by we, I mean me, okay? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, royal we.
Yes.
It's all on that side of the camera, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. No, it's
Bye.
not. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.